Right.
I'm ready.
I'm ready. All right, we'll call this meeting to order. March 5th, 2025 school board meeting, Glendale-River School District School Board. Roll call. Chris Robinson. Here. Katie Avalos. Here. Karen Cronwell. Here. Daniel Bailey. Here. Carla Bennington Cross is here. It's nice to all be in the room in person together again. It's been about a month. All right, at this time, if you wish, you may stand to say the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you, everyone. Item 1D, agenda approval.
I move to approve the agenda. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Good. Item 1E, the agenda is approved. Item 1E, approval of the board meeting minutes from the February 19th, 2025 meeting.
Move to approve those meeting minutes as submitted. Second.
Any discussion or revisions?
I had just a question about the recording of like a procedural thing, and I'm gonna pull up my notes. I can just ask. It might be like not big enough to. Okay. It was a motion to revise policy 839. I'm sorry, 3A. A motion to revise policy 8395 and vote independently. And then there's a motion to approve the other policies. And then the board voted on policy 8395 independently. So it's just missing, like, it's a motion. I'm assuming you guys approved the motion to talk about it separately. And like, is that just nitpicking? I don't know.
I've never had that
Discussion, so
happen
I don't know.
before.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so
Motion to revise. Nobody, did
8395.
anyone second? Did you guys vote on it? And then there's,
The answer is yes.
Okay, so it's missing.
The question of like who at this point, I think is probably.
so, and I don't know if it might be insignificant.
I might have it in my notes.
Anyway, I'm fine approving the minutes. It's just like, I just noticed that.
yeah, I hear what you're saying. So it should say the motion to revise what the vote on that was.
Yeah.
And let's see, so policy 8395. Yeah, I can't tell from this if it passed as revised.
It definitely did.
Okay,
We didn't revise it.
you see what I'm saying?
Oh, we didn't revise.
as proposed, not with orange revisions.
We took
I
out that
see.
So
one
maybe
piece.
can we just
voted
clarify
on
that for
it.
the minutes? That's all. How the policy was approved. That's all.
So that the motion to revise did not pass?
Well, it seems like you moved it to talk independent. Anyway, I mean, I think we just clarify that
I
by.
think there are two separate questions on it.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, so we just need to clarify that with section 3A.
That's all.
So it would. All right, so how do we do this? Do we,
And Carla, to be clear, if you go to the very bottom, it does say that 3A was passed 2-1 in favor, but without the revision. Or it doesn't clarify if it was revised.
So could I move to amend the current motion on the table to approve the minutes to do so with the caveat that 3A will be clarified for motion clarity?
Sure.
Okay,
Yes.
there's second. Okay.
all right, so we have a motion to approve the board meeting minutes for February 19, 2025.
Your motion to amend.
Oh, you want to vote on that first? Okay, motion to amend the board meeting minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so now, motion to approve the board meeting minutes as amended per Danielle Bailey's suggestion.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Remember, we're a small informal board, so if we don't get it 100% technically correct,
If it's.
it's okay.
It's fine.
Okay. No, I think it's important for it to be clear. Thank you, Danielle. All right, item F, meeting grounding, Ms.
Okay,
Danielle has agreed to lead our grounding.
yeah, and I'm gonna say it kind of fast, because I wrote it saying, okay, so. I am hoping that this grounding will center us on the idea of connection and its counterpart, disconnection. So tonight is a data heavy meeting, and a lot of information has been broken down by separating groups of students into various demographics. There are compelling reasons to disconnect students by demographic, but as I've been going through this, I've been wondering if there are perhaps more or at least equally compelling reasons to not do so as the primary way of processing this type of information, or to do so less prominently when we are looking at things like this from a higher level. For those of us less hands-on in the day-to-day going-ons in our schoolhouses. And I don't know the answer, it's just a question that came up for me as I was going through this information, so I'm wondering aloud right now. What if we were looking for more ways to find more common ground and connection with each other and among our students, and talking about those connections? Then there was something about seeing these demographics broken out in the presentations repeatedly that had me wondering if they don't serve to reinforce negative narratives and stereotypes, that we are inherently different from one another, some of us better than others because nature, because politics, because of God, because money, because of intelligence or privilege or what's between our legs. And tonight, we're going to review opportunity gaps, test scores, behavior and discipline information, and we're going to see that data disaggregated and often broken down by race, sex, languages spoken, abilities, physical and mental, or economic privilege. And so my grounding is also maybe a call to arms. This is how it's feeling to me right now, because I think those with significant power over others all too often thrive on our disconnection, on our seeing ourselves as separate from each other. And in the world today, I would posit that the more disconnected someone feels, the more they will face challenges with mental health, belonging, social relationships, self-advocacy, and fulfilling their potential. Yet, all that said, I find solace and inspiration knowing that our admin team, our staff, and our board are united in the belief that we exist in community with each other and that everyone deserves to belong, everyone deserves to be seen and to thrive. And both the visible and invisible labor, mental, emotional, physical, that our admin, our teachers, and our staff do every day that we don't always see firsthand as a board or community is a testament to the core values we all strive to embody. Similarly, the visible and invisible labor that we as a board do every day is a testament to our core values, that not everybody witnesses that work firsthand. And the visible and invisible labor that our students and families and community members do every day is a testament to their core values, our shared core values. So this feels like a call to arms what I'm about to say, but I promise it isn't asking any of us to do anything more than keep on keeping on. Public education is currently under attack. It is under attack by folks who do not believe in the power and value of a free and appropriate public education, or perhaps they do know the value and the power of a public education, and that is why it's under attack. And that is why we must keep on showing up for students and for each other every day, creating opportunities for meaningful connection and empowering our community. Because the power and the potential that public education has to equip our youth tangible skills and tools to realize the kind of world we all want to live in is immeasurable. And that is true for every kid in the school, for every family in our community, regardless of their demographics, that sometimes feel like they disconnect us from one another more than they connect. So I'm hoping what I'm saying is resonating and that I can try to ground us all in the call to continue walking this path together. My call to arms is an invitation to you all to join me in pledging allegiance to our students and our community. A beautiful microcosm reflective of our wonderfully diverse and interconnected world. The world may feel aflame to many who lead with compassion and equity in their hearts and overwhelming. But I hope you take solace in knowing that what we do here matters on the deepest of levels. So that's it.
Thank you, Danielle.
Yeah.
Lovely. Great way to start our meeting.
All
right. Thank you, Danielle. Now we are in section 2A, public comments. At this time, would any visitors like to speak on a non-agenda item?
All right, moving on then. Anyone online who wishes to speak?
Nope.
Okay, moving on to section 3, whole child growth and success of our agenda. This is a heavy section. We have an hour dedicated to this, and we're going to start with item A, school spotlight on the Glen Hills Black History Program.
Right, so spotlighting the program, we had last Thursday, our Glen Hills Black History Program. We had an incredible crowd in which our students were able to come out and showcase all their talents, their learning, their collaborative work with teachers. Glen Hills teacher, Lilitha Morales sent out some pictures and a beautifully written piece. I asked if she was okay if I read what she wrote because it was better than I could do, right? So she said Black History Month began to teach young people about Black and African American contributions to the US. Today it celebrates Black people's activism and achievements around the world. The theme for 2025 is African Americans in labor. This year, 2025 marks the 100th anniversary and creation of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters and Maids by labor organizer and civil rights activist A. Philip Randolph. Martin Luther King Jr. incorporated issues outlined in by Randolph's March on Washington movement, such as economic justice, into the Poor People's Campaign. Glen Hills uniquely celebrated Black History Month thanks to our former educator and colleague, Mike Birmingham, who was instrumental in bringing this program to our school. So the highlights. Fourth graders explored the powerful story of Brick by Brick, which sheds lights on enslaved people who built the White House. Our fifth graders created trading cards to show labor contributions of African Americans from 1619 to present day. Our sixth graders created protest signs and flyers and reflected labor movements and marched around to demonstrate solidarity and with past labor movements. Our seventh graders honored hard work and dedication of the women of this 6,088th Battalion in World War II through a museum exhibit and enactment. This also included celebrating our own Milwaukee resident and great aunt to one of our sixth graders, Miss Anna Mae Robertson, who was part of the 688. Our eighth graders researched and conducted interviews highlighting the impact of local Black labor in civic and STEM related fields, including our own Black educators and local Black leaders. Every department at our school celebrated Black excellence in their own way throughout this month. Our band, orchestra, and choir students performed beautifully, concluding the night by singing the song Lift Every Voice and Sing by Rosamond Johnson, arranged by Sam Baltzer. And the entire Glendale community, including our mayor, our aldermen and alderwomen, and state representative Darren Madison came to celebrate with us. It was a fantastic evening and a huge shout out to Glen Hills, the staff and their students for all their hard work.
Either the Mr. Williamses like to say anything?
No pressure.
No pressure.
I just appreciate, like I said, the other night, I appreciate the willingness of the community to come out and celebrate Black history. Our community is very diverse, school community. Outside of the school community is very diverse, and to see all those faces, singing Lift Every Voice and Sing, it lets me know that we come very long.
It was very powerful having the audience stand up and share. It was just, I had goosebumps all over. And I would point out that all 5 board members were there, which I don't know has happened in my time. So thank you everyone for being there, for supporting this incredible work that your schoolhouse is doing. Love it.
I just want to add, it's come a long way, because it started when our kids were in, I think, 7th grade,
Who, Jesse and
Jesse and Ethan,
Oh.
they were in 7th grade, and it
Okay.
was a mere shadow of what it is now. And they only did one verse of Lift Every Voice, and now we do this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments, members of the public, visitors? Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 3B, Summer Academy Programming.
Going to ask the Director of Teaching and Learning, Jennifer Stick, come up and give that information on Summer Academy programming.
Hello, Jennifer. You're so close to me.
I know. All right,
So based on, school board policy 2440, the board shall annually approve a summer school program and determine non-resident tuition rates. So within my report, I shared out the tuition rates for non-resident students. And it would be $90 per course, $360 per student for the 4 courses for the one entire summer school program. And the other thing is, also pieces of the programming that employing teacher and administrative staff. Currently, we have 17 internal staff members who are going to be doing summer school, 5 external staff and 14 internal paraprofessionals. So we have a really good start to our program planning, and we're hoping to have everything rolling out our program guide and all of that in the next couple of weeks. Right. Yes.
Okay, so the recommendation is to have a motion to approve the 25 Summer Academy Program tuition fees for non-resident students and material supply fees. Would anybody like to make that motion before, and then we can go to discussion?
I move to approve the Summer Academy program and the non-resident tuition fees as presented for the 2025 Glendale-River Hills Summer Academy.
I second.
Okay, and I think you intentionally left off material and supply fees, right?
I hope.
But it makes sense that you did,
Okay,
because
Yes, I
it
did.
is
I
not.
meant to. Yes.
Because I think that's what we were all sitting here wondering, because there was nothing presented about material and supply fees.
Okay. No, just tuition fees.
Okay, so, all right, we'll start down here then with Chris. Any discussion, thoughts or questions?
No.
Katie? No. Lauren?
My only thought was the intention that we would be approving material? Okay.
It's written into the policy that way, I think that's correct.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, I have 2 or 3 questions. The policy says that we appoint a director. Have we done that? So is that a motion that we need to also make and approve? We could do it separately, but, and then my question around is does appointing a director involve any additional pay or stipend?
I can answer that question. Dr. Smith has typically run summer school, where Jenica Westfall is planning summer school, and because that position exists, we were looking at hiring a teacher lead to support that position with a stipend of $4,000.
Okay, so you'll
then-
ask us to appoint a director down the line?
Yes, that will come,
Or-
yeah,
okay.
that will come, that the teacher lead position will come forward to you, and I can at that time share with you too the cost, there will be a cost savings in that in terms of looking at previous years and having a teacher lead versus an administrator running the program.
Will the title be interchangeable, director, teacher lead? Like,
So the planning and preparation for summer school would fall under Jenica Westfall.
under her duties already?
Yes, and then the person who is on site with students during the day to help run the
Directing.
program would be directing.
Daily direct, so
Daily
you could call him a director?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I wasn't confusing.
Yep.
Okay,
Got it.
okay, then this question, which perhaps is just, do you have an anticipated revenue from the 360 cost for non-resident tuitions? Have you thought of? I'm curious, my overall question is, when you do a cost analysis of Summer Academy and you look at the cost of salaries and running it, whatever that means. And then I assume you just balance that with what we see as additional money coming in for the FTE reassessment. Like, is that how you look at it, or do we just look at it as, like, how do we look at this fiscally?
So in order to come up with that, we look at what the tuition cost would be for a non-resident student to come, and we break that into the the amount of time that students are with us during that time. So we're looking at what we would earn we get for our resident students to come in, right? And we break that down that way so that there's comparable costs to look at that based on FTE. So it's not just like a random number, it's not based on programming costs, it's based on what does it cost to have a student attend summer school? A resident student, what do we get reimbursed for that? And then we look at breaking that apart to be comparable for non-resident students.
Okay, so we see the cost of a resident student at Summer Academy is around $360. Is that what I'm, so make sure I'm understanding? And then we get reimbursed for that for our resident students because of the claiming of the
Yes.
FTE. Okay,
So then,
and so that, okay, so the
So it breaks-
360 is
it's a break even, yeah.
Okay, that's it, okay.
Yeah.
It's a break even with staffing and like paying teachers and stuff.
But it'll all depend on how many student, non-resident students come.
So the staffing is, sorry, my math, is baked into that 360, the cost of what it is to educate a student in summer school. Or if someone can explain it better to me, because I'm being dumb. Do you know what I'm?
No, I guess I would wonder, I mean, some of that are fixed costs, right? So like we're not adding teachers, we have spaces based on what is available, right, after, so when does non-resident student enrollment start?
It all starts at the same.
At the same time. So then is it possible that a resident would be excluded from enrollment because a non-resident enrollment?
Take it second. No, I'm asking about staffing costs.
Because but our staffing wouldn't change. We wouldn't add staff because we had non-resident people.
That's not what I'm asking, just in general, the staffing costs for summer academy. Does that is that part of your break-even equation?
We would, yeah, we would have to calculate that.
Okay,
We could
that's- yeah.
calculate
Yeah.
what last year looked like, and then after
Yeah.
summer school this year, we can calculate what that looks like, yeah.
I don't need the answer now, I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure
Yeah.
that question was clear
Yeah.
as to how. I wanted it.
Yeah, and then
I think they were replicating, so.
Yeah.
It's done last year, so we'll, it's fuzzy.
I know.
It's because you guys have multiple
Yeah.
mics on.
Oh, you too, it's you too. Okay, thank you, that's it, that's just like a curiosity, not for now.
And I think to look at that too, is that it's not, we get to claim those FTEs, right?
Mhm.
For the summer, and that's kind of how that reimbursement is, they roll into our FTE count, which is.
That's what I'm
It's
trying
not
to
like,
figure out.
I don't know if there's like a direct, like we would have to look at, does that FTE count equate how much we provide for our summer school programming? That I think Michelle would need to pull.
Yeah.
that extract.
No rush, I'm just,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yep.
That's all I got.
The 360 per student, is that about the same as our partner districts also charge? So the other K
Mapledale, Indian Hill is charging $450, but they're a 5-week program. So we're identical.
per
We're-
week,
'cause
per
we're
week for the same,
Yeah.
got it, okay. All right, any further questions or comments? All right, we've got a motion to approve the 2025 Summer Academy program and tuition fees for non-resident students. I got that right? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Jennifer. We are being very efficient tonight, and now on to the meat, student data review.
All right, I'll
Stay
kick it off.
there.
All right, so there was a report shared with you, whole child growth and success is our strategic pillar that we're focusing on. And I just shared some information around the 2 assessments. So the first assessment was a Star Renaissance assessment, which is an online assessment. I just wanted to talk to you real quick about the differences between the 2 assessments. Star Renaissance is utilized more of a proficiency. It's a computer adaptive assessment. We utilize that for math for grades 1st grade through 8th grade this last trimester. And we used it for ELA for 4th through 8th grade. And it's used as a screener within our district 3 times a year. Okay, so for us to kind of check and dip in on the progress students are making. It's very helpful.
That's 6 total, 3 for math, 3 for.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, please. Good question. So it's also very good for predicting proficiency on our bullet exam. So it's based off of standards. So it's looking at the Wisconsin standards for ELA and the Wisconsin standards for math, and then it looks at that proficiency for students. The other assessment, Games Web, which is new to everyone, a lot of us in the state this year, is based off of Act 20, and it is a reading readiness screener. Okay, so these assessments are very different. The majority of them are one-on-one, so the student receives like a list of letters and the teacher is asking the student to fluently name the letters. So it's very different than the computer-based assessment, right? So within the report, you also saw some examples of what the STAR assessment looked like, that multiple choice, right? And this one is more done one-on-one with the student, so the teacher is giving that assessment. There are two online assessments with Ames Web. One of them is the vocabulary one for second and third graders, and then there also is a reading comprehension one for second and third grade students. So there is a little bit of the online, but the majority of it is one-on-one, and the focus is reading worthiness versus standards and proficiency toward forward. So that's kind of the big difference between the two assessments. I also included in the report just our assessments that we're doing for Ames Web for grade level as well, so you can see what diagnostics and different pieces we're doing for Act 20 as well. Are there any questions around the assessments before?
Chris, Katie, Lauren, and now?
Are you gonna be mad? I have a couple.
Well, I do have one.
Oh, you go.
Lauren, yay.
I was wondering how, it's a new assessment, right? And it's a new, like, everybody had to learn something new, and the first few times you do it, it's different. And what is the teacher feedback with regards to the Ames Web, and how do they feel the rollout went through?
Well, we've been gathering feedback on every step. We have a 7-step process on launching all of this. So we have taken it very slow. We actually started in fall. So we've been practicing giving the assessments and doing a lot of that work, scheduling really flexible. We made tips and changes all the way through, and we got the feedback after each little step that we take. So we're taking bite-sized pieces of Act 20 instead of just giving everything to the teachers. They actually were very nervous prior to getting the assessment, right? But then afterwards, we're like, oh, it wasn't so bad. So now planning the spring assessment, which we just finished the scheduling for spring. They're like, we don't need extra support. We got this. So based off of what happened, right, and their comfort level, now they're feeling good about it. They're also doing a lot of that progress monitoring too. So they're in the system and they're used to giving those assessments. And I was just in a meeting yesterday talking about some of our students, and the teachers are like, they're really getting it now. Because they weren't used to how that assessment was given, right?
Right.
So then they might be triggering on a skill that they would have practiced a little bit, then they'd have it. So now we're gonna probably see some kids fall off, right? So it's good, right? It just takes us a little bit to get used to something.
Yeah, I'll be interested to the second.
Right, and we refine our practices too, and we have a lot of our teachers going to that early literacy leadership training, and a lot of that learning is going back to the school too, and sharing it out, so growing our leaders within our buildings, it's just so important.
Are you done, Karen?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
She had one question. I'm so.
Go there.
All right, thank you. I can use some refinement. Okay, that's because of you guys. That's all the lead work you guys did in the beginning, getting ahead of Act 20 stuff, preparing and like, I mean, I think that's what that shows. So that reflects well on you, and just wanted to highlight that.
Thank you, yeah, it's a work in progress.
Well, I know, but I mean, the fact that they feel confident, that's your job, is to, like help them feel confident. So anyway, I just think that that's really great, because I know across districts, this was rocky. The implementation was rocky.
And
for a lot of
strong
places.
support from Ryan and I and the coaching staff, and
So
really,
kudos to everybody.
really good work.
I'm curious, and I bet you don't know the answer, so it's something I can follow up on you with, in general, between STAR, Ames Web, Forward, and other things, like I'm in my head, I'm like, how much time do teachers and admin spend with PD prepping for these tests and then administering these tests? I guess I wouldn't count reviewing the information and utilizing that, because that feels like that's what we do with data. But I'm curious, like, how much effort as a group goes into this? Just, that's a curiosity. And then as a high level, thinking about the STAR and forward as screeners for predicting results on the forward. So we have a test that helps us predict how someone's gonna do on another test. And then thinking about the time that's going into that, I would just be so curious to be a fly on the wall with admin or teachers about how they feel about prepping kids to do well on a test so it can predict their success on another test. And how that actually truly relates to our goals of, you know, empowering our kids to be successful in the real world. And then even higher level, how does this success on these tests actually translate? But anyway, that's just like, when we talk about this, I'm like, wow, I know there's so much work that goes into that. And we place so much emphasis on it, partially because we are required to. I guess I just wondered what if we weren't.
Well, the STAR is about 20 to 30 minutes for an assessment, so
Okay.
it's quick. The STAR is
Okay.
quick, immediate, fast
Okay.
information, right?
Okay.
And
Yeah.
it's not just about the proficiency, it's about students meeting standards.
Right.
So it's
Okay,
twofold,
kind of,
right? So
yeah.
but it does help us know where we're headed probably for the forward,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
The forward takes a long time. Our 4th and 8th graders are doing heavy assessment
Yeah.
for both. Because there's multiple science, social studies, math,
Mhm.
ELA assessments. So that's, your building is pretty locked down for that, so Glen Hills will be.
Is that like a 2-day test?
It depends on how you, it depends on how you schedule it.
It's got different sections,
It's
right?
different,
So it takes a long
sections
time.
and different grades.
Sorry.
No, join in.
So that's definitely in a heavy lift.
Once a year, twice a year.
Once a year.
Once a year,
Yeah,
okay,
so usually around in April.
okay.
The Ames Web, I think this time was long because we had to do all diagnostic assessments, so it took us a very long time to get through it. So it was a big lift on coaches to help do some of that work, because if students triggered 25th percentile or below, they needed the full battery of diagnostics, which took hours per student.
Okay.
So that was a heavy lift, and you're looking at 100 students getting diagnostics.
Yeah.
Then that's a heavy lift, but it won't always be that
Okay,
way.
yeah.
So once a year, you end up doing diagnostics on the students, but once they're in a reading plan, then you don't have to do that battery of diagnostics.
Okay.
So that's been a shift and change. It's just that initial rollout. That was a heavy lift for Ames.
Okay.
And they are quick assessments. They're less than a minute.
Oh.
For the Ames. For
Okay.
assessment. So they are pretty quick.
Okay.
But the heavy lift, I would say, is forward. The biggest heavy lift is forward. And then we also did some changes with our common formative
Right,
assessments
that's
in
the
the
other-
buildings.
yeah.
Pulling off assessments we didn't need and putting games in there instead. So we're very
Yeah.
conscious of over assessing students because we want to teach them.
Yeah.
Right, and
Yeah.
not over assessing our students either. And there's always a fine balance, right?
Yeah.
So we'll continue to work on that, you know,
Yeah.
to learn more about the Ames Web and how students are doing.
Thank you for hearing.
I have questions
It's
too.
really good questions.
Where my head went, I was surprised to hear, and I shouldn't have been, that the Ames Web is one-on-one assessment. It raises questions in my mind about how bias and queuing creeps in, right? I could imagine, not in our school district, but I could imagine some schools where those numbers get pumped to look good. You know, and I'm just curious what kind of training and support teachers get to avoid that kind of, I don't know, you know, queuing, guiding, misinterpreting.
There's like an online training and little courses that you have to take through Ames Web in order to give it. We provided coaching support too, so the coaches could help monitor and support the teachers as they started doing these assessments.
Oh, so there were observers sometimes, and then you could get the feedback
Yeah.
and coaching.
Yeah. The other piece, yes, there's gonna be fidelity issues.
Yeah.
I've heard about them in other districts,
Yeah.
right? So there is, it could be, you know, some teachers are accepting that letter sound or somebody may not accept that letter sound, so then they had to re-norm within the district of how they were getting.
And you know, my main concern would be that someone who needs support misses it.
Mhm.
Like I've seen it happen with like students in special education. It happened with my daughter where she got so much support. She would be complaining to me, I'm not being given a chance to learn. I don't know what I know or don't. I think it would all be well intentioned, you know? So I'm glad you're coaching and thinking about that because that was the red flag that went on. The other thing I was thinking as you were chatting with Danielle about all the time is, and I think I may have asked offline and maybe I got an answer and forgot, Anna.
I'm really curious to know if we're tracking, time and costs associated with Ames Web and Act 20 work. So we can see what the actual, if we can establish a dollar cost to the district for that unreimbursed mandate. I think that would be, if there's time, if there's capacity, that would be really helpful in advocacy at the state level around funding for this work that's being pushed out to schools.
I think an easy extract on that would be looking at like the cost of the testing and maybe additional training that has happened. I think where it gets tricky is like the embedded work that happens during the teacher workday, parceling that out and thinking about what percentage of it goes to Ames Web versus what it would have gone to in
Right.
another area, right?
Right.
So, but I do think you could look at the amount of time it took to give the test and we could measure it in time potentially, but then I think those costs associated with the actual training and stuff like that could be extracted.
Okay,
And
so
there-
just
there
something
was
to
no
keep on.
cost For the training for use of.
No? Okay.
There was PD that you all attended though. Didn't you have the
The,
paper?
the Early Literacy Institute, that was separate from me as well.
Oh.
Okay, but that was a
But
Act
the
20
Act
cost.
20 and
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we have those costs for the other pieces.
Okay.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you. One more round? Any questions or comments from board members? Visitors? Okay, thank you so much, Jennifer.
Well, I'm gonna just, next slide, we're gonna just dive right in. Reminder of district vision, a community that pursues equity, where each person belongs and thrives. Our district mission, empowering growth, connection, and success for all members of our learning community. Thank you for grounding us. That was great. Appreciate that. Strategic planning pillars, we're gonna focus on whole child growth and success, and exceptional staff and exceptional leadership. And we'll be starting with Parkway and Mr. Ryan Craig.
Welcome, Mr. Craig. It's okay.
All right, so the data is kind of laid out into three areas, starting with literacy, then into math, and then culture, we'll call it. And so the first part is our literacy data. And so like Jenica said, we just have our first round of Ames Web data here. We don't have any comparables yet. We will have comparables in the spring for the trimester 3 that we'll be able to share with you. And we broke it out by the assessment and then the percentile on there as well. And so Jenica, you might have to help me a little bit, and I don't want to get too much in the weeds about like what triggers a reading plan, but it can get a little funky. It's not the 25th percentile on all of it. It's on certain aspects of the Ames Web that triggers a personal reading plan below the 25th percentile. And if you care to know about that later, let me know. I can walk you through that.
It's
But
like particular skills.
Yes.
It's the oral reading fluency.
Got it.
yeah.
Okay.
And so this first one is K5 that you see on the very top. And then as you continue to scroll down, again, these are the various Ames Web's assessments that you see in that left-hand corner, along with the percentiles.
Can I ask, what does nationally normed mean the percentiles are big? I'm gonna answer the question, are based on the way students are performing nationally. Yes,
Correct.
thank you. Sorry.
Yep.
Say it out
As
loud.
you said it, we're like, got it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you want us to let you finish it all and then save our questions or,
You can do whatever you'd like.
well, it's whatever works
Bother
best
me.
for you. Why don't we hold up
For me, I'll hold it.
other than like, I don't understand the words you're saying, let's let him finish this section.
No, I got you.
So those are the various percentiles that we see, which then trigger into our next slide, which is our reading plan data slide. And so you will see that we currently have 39% of our K5 through 3rd graders that have personal reading plans. And then it's broken out by grade level on there about the percentage of students. So as you can see, right, it increases as we continue to move along. With 50% of our 3rd graders right now having personal reading plans. The next part would be what our coaches and interventionists.
Good one.
Work on, so we reported back in the fall, around the number of students receiving tier 3 intervention. And so you can see the comparables for trimester 1 and trimester 2. They are on there. These for literacy now are students that have personal reading plans, with significant scores, that need the most support. And so those students now are being seen, that's the 51 students there that are in tier 3 literacy intervention with a coach or an interventionist. And a little bit different than what we did last year, but we have some, or last fall, but we did some insights, response, and future work. A lot of this you probably have seen, right? But first through third graders, high percent of at-risk students in the oral reading fluency. K-5 shows a higher percentage of students at risk for letter fluency, and letter sound fluency. First time staff and students have used AveWeb, we talked about that. That was a large lift. It was also a large lift for our teachers, but our students had never seen that assessment before too. So taking that into account, when looking at some of this data as well. So Jenica mentioned this, but every student that then recorded in the 25th percentile and triggered a reading plan also needed the diagnostic assessment for those as well. So that was a response because it gave us a little bit more detailed picture behind that learner. We had 16 total tier 3 groups that were not special ed, for these literacy groups. K through 3 had the reading plan creation. So the actual like writing of plans is a new thing for our teachers and coaches to go through. And we did that collaboratively and together. Then the coaches and interventionists also work closely with teachers to provide that tier 2 support. So, you know, we have 51, I can't remember what it was, 51 students that received tier 3, which means that we have a large number of students receiving their reading plan support and a tier 2 intervention from classroom teachers. And so that support is being had by coaches and interventionists supporting what they're going to be doing in that tier 2 intervention and how they're progress monitoring as well. And then something totally new, which, you know, I'm learning as a parent with the student with the reading plan is that weekly progress monitoring, right? And so it's weekly progress monitoring towards that goal, which we will be sharing with our families and caregivers over conferences. And then we talked about the early literacy leadership, and that was something that happened and just wrapped up. Some future work for us. We're going to deepen our familiarity and fluency, like how quickly and how effectively are we going through the phonics curriculum, which is at 95%. That's a new curriculum for us, and we're getting better and better every day, but that's something that we think will have a huge impact on the Ames Web assessments that trigger reading plans, based off of the reading fluency and diagnostic assessments that we did. We'll continue our work in our PLTs around research-based instructional strategies and continue to refine our MLSS system and creating an assessment schedule for next year. And then our early literacy team is also going to help support for professional development and some of the learning that we did together as well.
Is this a good place to pause?
Probably after each one would probably be.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So we'll start with Kiki this time. You guys have any comments? No? Karen?
So I do have questions, and it's okay if the answers aren't known right now, right? The first thing I would ask is if the challenge is to only use a particular piece of Ames Web to make the determination for a need for a reading plan, what is the value of rolling out the entire assessment?
We're state mandated to give other pieces of the assessment, but they only trigger on one part of the assessment.
So does it, I guess my point is, does it give you guys good information?
Yeah, it gives us a little more holistic information. We're finding that a lot of our second and third graders and first graders are doing really well in all the other assessments and are in the 50th or above percentile, but on oral reading fluency, which is the trigger,
Yeah,
that's what's qualifying them for a reading plan. So they're not accurate, fast readers, right?
That means reading out loud.
Yeah, reading a passage, a grade level passage out loud, and that's something that instructionally, like in our practices within our classrooms, we need to beef up a little more too, right? This is something the kids were not used to doing. They're used to reading a book.
right.
Versus, necessarily a passage this way, so this is some new learning for staff and for students. But the other diagnostics too, really help support, like, is it truly like a fluency issue or do they need some more work
Yeah.
with phonemic awareness? Do they have?
Spaces.
Yeah, so there are some really good things about this, to help staff and help learning and help support students. Because we're drilling down on those students now, and that's really important.
And oral reading fluency, does that translate then to like reading fluency silent? So would that then prognosticate like their ability to read more efficiently in general? Is that why it's
Yeah.
important? Okay,
It's that automaticity.
just wanted to be sure that those were the connection I made, but I wanted.
We were
to-
finding like
True.
some of our students, because they're so used to, sometimes students are prompted for, oh, you figured that word out, look at you, they're using all their strategies, right? And they're doing that on that assessment instead of like, skipping and we keep going,
Yeah, right.
So,
Yeah, just going around the word. It
yeah,
doesn't matter.
yeah, so it's work to be done.
Okay, were you guys, what were your reactions to the outcomes? Did you feel like this data was consistent with what you had possibly anticipated, or do you feel like it was revelatory?
I think we anticipated it because a lot of school districts did this in fall. And they were finding 50% of their students were also triggering in many of the surrounding school districts.
Interesting. Okay,
So I think we all knew that this is where it was gonna land.
awesome. I also have another question mark with a number sign, but I don't know what that was referencing at this point.
We'll turn this around, just keep thinking.
I think, thank you for that, because you answered one of my questions around comparison to like other districts, so these weren't sort of surprising results. Can you remind me, our reading curriculum at Parkway is 95 and Lucy Calkins, like those together? So within those curriculums, do they offer support for that beefing up of the reading out loud, or is that gonna be something you're gonna have to supplement outside of those curriculums?
I think it's just putting in a couple little mini units, and it does have fluency within them, and 95% it has a heavy lift on fluency. So it's just getting teachers to learn it. This is their first year implementing. So just getting some practice with that, and it's the first year for students of doing it too. Right, so they're not used to it as well.
Well, it was piloted the year before, right?
In 3rd through 5th grade,
Oh,
and this
okay,
is a new rollout for kindergarten through
yes,
second.
got you,
So,
okay,
so it's
okay.
new for anybody
Yeah.
who took the Ames Web assessment, like
Okay.
students.
Yeah, there's a lot of reading out loud I have to do with my 4th grade. Phonics,
Yeah, and 95, yeah, is in the 4th and 5th grade. as well.
Yeah, so that was my other question though, because I think 95 is sort of on deck for review in the coming year, or like curriculum
Will-
review
will
cycle.
We'll evaluate it next year to
Okay.
make sure that it's making the gains for our students that we're expecting to.
Okay, but that's at Glen Hills, not at Parkway, or it would be,
It's
Universal.
for K-5 through 5th grade.
okay, thank you for clarifying that. And then my last question is just around, so kids with IEPs or kids with disabilities in relation to like this Act 20. Where do they fit in these screeners, or, I mean, maybe that's too nuanced, because I know IEPs can be different, but like. For example, my child at birth in early childhood, let's say he's in 3rd grade, what happens, how do these
Do you want to
kids?
share that?
Sure. I can talk about that a little bit, and this is something, obviously, when something is pushed from state legislation, they may not be thinking to the edges about all students. So one of the things that kind of came later in the year was an option within the IEP process. With our district-wide assessments, Ames Web is now like kind of lumped in with our district-wide assessments to what they would say advanced from the Ames Web screener. And what they mean by advanced is advance them from the screener to do diagnostic work. Which
Okay.
still requires you to do like a diagnostic workup of students, knowing that for some students, that diagnostic workup isn't necessarily meaningful either,
So
right?
not relevant to their, like, whatever it is, whatever the disability is or
Yes.
IEP says. So my child who's nonverbal, you would be forced to do a diagnostic of like his reading comprehension.
So this is what,
Interesting.
I know we're being recorded, but like,
Hey,
I say to
Call to
the, I
arms.
say to the
Love
special
that.
education teacher, we are not gonna do something to say we've done it. So if it doesn't make sense, if it's not fair to the student, if you know you're not going to get meaningful information about that, and the student has a goal related to literacy, they're gonna trigger for a personal reading plan anyway, make that goal related to what their IEP goal says, they should match, let's make it meaningful, because the IEP should ideally trump all, right? So
Absolutely.
that's what our special education teachers are doing, they're doing what makes sense. They're not
Thank you.
putting students through unnecessary assessment that's going to yield 0 results.
Parent and a board member, thank you. And a community member for saying that out loud recorded.
I have a follow-up related to that. Is it then allowed, for instance, when we're talking about alternate assessments or, so there's, within the course of that conversation, where does that fall with regards to alternate assessment compared to the screener, and what about the potential, and I hesitate to say it, but opting out, like, is none of that is.
Currently, yeah, there's no opt-out on the books. So there's no.
It's just
opting out.
required across the board.
Wow.
I did remember my other question, and it was related to this. I was wondering with regards to the MLSS and our students who have been identified as special education needs, how are we addressing their like tier 2 needs and their tier 3 needs? Is that happening within the traditional MLSS, or is it automatically being absorbed somehow by in other ways? I'm sorry, multi-level systems of support, you guys.
Yeah.
Thank
you.
Are-
Cheers.
These are tiered interventions.
I'll learn it, I'll learn it.
Okay, but for the general audience too, the first tier is universal, it's what everyone gets. The second tier is specialized to some extent, but still within like kind of the context of the classroom, and then the third, or maybe like someone slightly outside the classroom, but the third is specific to the student always. It could be non-special ed, it can be special ed.
So much of our students that already have a literacy goal or a reading goal in their IEP, that personal reading plan is really being led and driven by their special education teacher, right? With then that general education teacher too, kind of providing some small group supports as well. But the majority of that focus for that reading plan is coming from the special education teacher.
Okay.
If there's not a literacy or there's not a reading goal, then we're leaning on those interventionists to support that reading plan,
Or classroom teacher.
or the classroom teacher.
Any more? Okay, I have a couple questions. When you were talking about writing PRPs, Ryan, that being a new thing, I had 2 questions around that. One, I was curious, and this might not be the right setting, I was curious generally what a PRP looks like whether you're building that based on mandates in the state in Act 20, or I'm curious about what that looks like. And then the second question, as you were saying, that's a new thing, and you were describing kind of these processes. I wondered how much of the methodology you're using now is really a change based on Act 20, or how much of what you're doing as you describe kind of this process for evaluating and intervening, how much of that was already in place and is just being modified? Just sort of, paint me a word picture.
I mean, Jenica, you might want to speak to the personal review, because she and the coaches work the hardest on developing what that outline looks like.
There are pieces that are state mandated within the personal reading plan, so there is a framework of how we had to lay it out. We added our own flavor to it, of
Okay.
course. But it is laid out, that meets state statute.
Because we were already doing some sort of intervention plans, weren't we? So this is just sort of a modified version of what we were already doing.
Exactly.
Okay,
And it's more like the teachers are engaging more in the progress monitoring of it, where we had interventionists doing more of that,
okay.
so.
Yeah, so it sounds like really what you're doing is sort of responding to Act 20 from where we were, just sort of modifying to fit into a newly stated mandate. Whereas we're already providing a lot of these interventions
Yeah, the
already.
structures were there already for us to provide the various supports.
Yeah,
Now we just used the information we got from Act 20, rather than what we were using with STAR and classroom assessments.
got it. And then weekly progress monitoring, is that new, or is that again, just sort of a modification of?
It's new because that's mandated, so that's new for classroom teachers and interventionists, so they have to weekly monitor the progress on each student's personal reading plan, and then share that with caregivers.
Oh, so they have to send a weekly,
Not weekly, sorry, but they do have to share how they are progressing through.
I see.
That's,
So what does that monitoring look like? It's like sitting down and reading with the student
Yeah, they're very quick, like, I was just in a K-5 classroom, it was like a 30-second progress monitoring, depending on what the goal is for that student.
So it's like a quick touch. It's
Exactly.
not disrupting the classroom
No,
or,
and it's usually happening within that tier 2 or tier 3 intervention that's already occurring.
got it. Okay, that's all I've got. Thank you. Chris?
And what we noticed about the progress monitoring, which was a adjustment that we had to make was. Maybe I'm going too much of the week, but the weekly progress monitoring, you can't, if a student misses a week or the interventionist or somebody's out for the day you were gonna progress monitor. Other progress monitors allow you to go back and double up the week before or the week after. Aimsweb does not. So what we realized is we were progress monitoring on Friday because we thought that made sense, right? We're gonna go through this intervention Monday through Friday, and all of a sudden someone's sick. A kid is out or an adult's out, and all of a sudden we missed a progress monitoring point.
Yeah.
Oh crap, like now we're
Yeah.
missing a point. So we adjusted that and most of our progress monitoring now is happening on Wednesdays because most of our students have staff are there. And we're able to then, if someone's absent, catch up Thursday or Friday.
That's good pivoting.
Yes.
Yeah, good work.
2 questions, I think. Do you have any theories on why more 3rd graders have reading plans?
I think that the overall reading fluency becomes like the nationally normed. It becomes more and more difficult, obviously, but I think it is something that we have not. Maybe been as specific as we need to be in our like phonics training or our phonics literature training and teaching, as well as our like just overall reading curriculum, and we, and that's just something that we need to then adjust to. Yeah. I don't know, unless Jenica has different thoughts of.
No, I agree, and I think beefing things up with that 95% core is really gonna help support, and the current 3rd graders have not received that.
Right, that was my
Yep.
theory too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And then second question, do we have any expectations for incoming kindergartners that we share? Are they supposed to have any expectations of letters, sound knowledge or anything? I don't know that. And I don't know who to ask that to.
K4 actually will be doing this assessment in the spring, so we'll have baseline data from our K4 students. K4 will not have any personal reading plans. It's just to get us have a clear picture as to where students are sitting and to be able to make any tweaks or changes to our curriculum in K4 to get them readied for K5. So once we see that data, we'll have more, information on where we need to get our students, for K5. But the beginning of K5, it's very light. It's like 3 letters. Letter sounds.
I don't want to say our K4 essential like what they meant essential was 5 sounds and only all the letters identified.
I
Like
can
so
look up, but
their essential standard is more than what they're going to be required to come into K5 with.
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, I am going to point out at this time, we have about 15 minutes left for this agenda item. There's a lot of interest here. We still have to go through math and then the behavior data. So what are your thoughts on what we should do, Anna? Do we want to run over time? Do we want to
something else?
table the discipline data to the next meeting so that we can really finish focusing on? I would feel terrible if the Mr. Williams have sat here for no reason.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what to do.
To honor the time of staff, I feel like we should continue with this and table other items on the agenda.
Okay, all right, let's get this done.
All right, let's go.
I agree. Thank you. Everyone's okay with this?
I was kind of peeking.
Okay.
Feedback from you, so we didn't know.
I was too, I was watching. Okay, onward to math.
All right, so math does have some comparables because we've been using star math for quite a while. So the first table is the overall proficiency and then broken down by demographics on here. And so I'll have some insights later, obviously, about this, but you can see some numbers that are in green being positive, right? They made growth. Red is negative growth and negative change. So the next graph is then us breaking down our star math assessments by essential standards. And so except for K4 and K5, because this is, to Danielle's point, we use common formative assessments because we don't use STAR for K4 or K5. And we did a lot of work around common formative assessments, and we were able to pull that data from what we've already accomplished for K4 and K5. And so you will see the growth there using what we call internal data, which is basically just our common formative assessments that our teachers use. And then the next slides, first, second, and third, are the STAR math broken down by essential standard. Again, from the beginning, developing and secure in fall, and now the beginning, developing and secure in winter, with an overall goal, right? Our district goal is 100% of our students will have our essential standards in reading and math as secure by spring of 2025. And as we continue to go, now we're looking at our tier 3 intervention for math. Very similar amount of students, very similar demographic, a little bit change in our gender, and making progress versus not making progress. I will note, right, that making progress is a relative term. They're making progress in what they're doing in their intervention. Some of those students may not be making sufficient progress to come back to move off of the tier 3 intervention. So I use making progress in a, yes, they're making
They're not
progress.
stuck.
Correct.
Right,
Yeah. And then some of our insights and response and future work. So overall, our math proficiency in STAR is growing at a slower rate in our essential standards. White, Hispanic, 2 or more races are growing in math proficiency, where our Black, Asian, and Black and Asian students and our students with disabilities or free and reduced lunch are declining in proficiency. Every math essential standard is seeing growth. Some are seeing significant growth. And then I will note this because I think it's important. Teacher teams and we as administrators in the building are seeing a much higher growth in our common formative assessment data than we are in our STAR data. Our math responses are, our coaches are continuing to do number corner professional development monthly to help prepare our teachers feel more organized and planned. We're teaching number corner every month. We started that in September and we continue that now. I will say our last PLT that was a math focused PLT was November 4th because of some of the Act 20 stuff that we were just getting around to. And so we have not talked about math curriculum and done unit internalizations since November 4th. This week and next week are the first times we jump back into that for math. Math coaches and interventions will continue to support in small groups for tier 3. And we added Math Fact Lab for math fluency as well for our students. Some of our future work is we are creating a look for tool for number corners just to collect some instructional data around number corner and how our staff are teaching. We're going to continue to evaluate Math Fact Lab. It's relatively new, so there's not a lot of feedback quite yet, but we'll keep evaluating Math Fact Lab for effectiveness. And then coaches and interventionists are looking at gap analysis in the curriculum versus and finding supplemental activities, whether that's through the privileged intervention books that we have or through other means to close those gaps that we're seeing. But like I said, we're going to continue unit internalizations that will help create common formative assessments that I think would be really powerful to show you data on in the future as we continue to develop those going forward. So yeah, common formative. And that's that.
Okay, we'll go around the table again. This time it's Karen's turn to go first, if you have any questions or comments.
The only question I had is, do you feel like the comparison and the data trends are consistent with where we'd expect them to be at this point in time for growth, with those, not the STAR?
Oh, in the common formative assessment?
Yeah, in the comments. Do you feel like that data trend is where you would expect it to be, where, because, you know, I mean, we generally see kind of a scattering.
Mhm.
Obviously, mastery would like to see a little bit higher, but is it going in the direction you would expect? Are there a number of students who still need to make progress? And where you would expect that to be happening at this point in the year, or are we lagging a bit?
Are you asking for common formative assessments from the whole entire school or just from the K4, K5 that I'm sharing with you here?
I might have asked you the wrong question. I guess K4, K5 is.
Yeah, and I can share how the common formative assessment data that we currently have for first and third. is where we want, right? I mean, we want the secure to show 100%. So when you're looking at K4 and K5, I would say this is probably fairly close, maybe a little higher than it would be for first and third, just because the skills are more basic. But like 88% and 83% for those two math standards are very high. We want to get to 100. We have 4 months left. 59 and 56 is relatively high as well, especially when you consider that growth from the beginning of the year. I think you would see similar data when we look at common formative assessments in math going forward as well. Part of that is just the development of the common formative assessments, right? Is the time and the process to create those so that those are actually hitting the essential standards that we've outlined. And then are you able to record those in our data sheets? But I think you'd see very similar growth.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now,
Quick. Math curriculum at Parkway is Bridges and Math Fact Lab. Is that like those two?
I wouldn't consider math fact lab is more like a supplemental, like math fluency. And am I missing more about math fact lab?
Yeah, it was brought in for more of that fluency piece. We're noticing fluency.
Yes.
Is it something that families are supposed to do at home with their
They
kids?
can.
Okay, but it's also done at school.
It's done in
Yes.
school as well.
Okay. Are there any opportunities at Parkway for one-on-one tutoring? Or tutoring, like, do we have any opportunities that exist for kids around? I don't know, math,
Like after school tutoring.
I don't know, just
Currently,
aside from, okay, just curious. And then, follow up for later, unless this is example of my poor math literacy, if I wanted to know the total percentage change of the math star for Parkway. Do I need to know the total number of students to figure that out, or is that? We got the percentage change for all the breakdown groups, but I just wanna know the percentage change overall for Parkway. Is there some equation I can do on my own, or do you have
I
that?
can just pull it up.
Okay, just that, okay, thank you. That's all I got, thanks.
I'll just share with you what I'm curious about. For all of these, I'm sitting here beginning to wonder, like, when I look at beginning, developing, secure, these sort of categories and cohorts, do we have, like national data to show whether our curve is similar to the curve in other schools? Do you see what I'm saying? Like
From this point.
well, in other words, what percentage of students would we expect to see in the secure category? What, is there a way that we can see how we compare to other, I'm thinking about the bell curve. Is our bell what we expect to see for a bell? As compared to other national data or state data or whatever. Does that make sense?
It does, because it's nationally normed, the bell is built into the norming, right? And so what you're looking at, I think what you're looking at is not necessarily the bell, what you would want to see is comparable data to another district, right?
Yeah.
'Cause
Oh,
if-
I see what you're saying. Yeah, the percentile itself is
Yeah,
the,
the issue
Yeah.
with any kind of nationally normed test is that 50 is in the middle, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the normed expectation, and
Right.
anything above is above and anything below is below, so
it's just built in.
yeah, it's built in.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, that's it. That's all I got. Chris? I don't have anything. Katie? Okay. Moving on.
So you will see the number of behavior referrals, on our next page. You'll see comparables from trimester 1 and 2 for office referrals, suspensions, and pre-expulsions, and broken down by grade as well. And then some insights. So all students in trimester 1 and 2 were non-white students. Suspensions decreased from 11 in trimester 1 to 1 suspension in trimester 2. Sorry, didn't need to hesitate like that. I don't know why I did that. Office.
Because it's exciting
It is.
data. It's good news.
Yeah.
That's a good reason to pause.
Yep, another celebration is that our office referrals dropped by nearly 40% from trimester 1 to trimester 2. February, as you can imagine, accounted for 50% of our referrals in trimester 2. February is always historically for every school a tough one.
It's a good thing.
It
It's
is.
the shortest. Is it as the weather?
I think it's, I think it's a combination of weather, people are sick, just, it's a dark time.
And kids are like, ah.
And then out of those February incidents, right, 50% of those happened during transitions, like recess and, hallway. The responses, I will say, I think our problem-solving team, which meets, we organized that process a lot clearer this year for for a teacher to have like a student that they're struggling with in some capacity, academically, behaviorally, to have the support they need. So the problem-solving team, there's a form you fill out that comes with data. The problem-solving team that sits around the table and brainstorms various ways and comes up with a plan for students. And I will say that a lot of the students that teachers have gone to the PST looking for support have seen a dramatic decrease in some of their behavior. Incidents, I would say. It doesn't show here, but we also have academic PSTs, and I think we've seen growth there too. So another response was that Dr. Smith and Ms. Weiss shared a tier 1 behavior presentation for the staff in the February PD day. Classroom teachers were given access to their grade level data for SEL indicators and on the dashboard, so they could see their grade level data broken down. And then we just implemented 2 weeks ago, I think you guys will like this, a Wednesday mindful moment. So our student support team, which consists of Peggy and Denise and Steve and Dr. Smith and I and Kelly sat down and looked at the data and noticed a lot of our problem, or a lot of the behavior incidents were written during lunch and recess. And during those transition times, and 10:40 is the one time in the day where nobody is at recess and nobody is transitioning in our building. So we do a 10:40 little mindful moment where we breathe and think of different things positively together. And it's literally a minute long.
You do it over the speaker?
Yep.
Nice.
I'm trying to get my mindful moment voice going. Give me a hard time. I did get like positive feedback even today. So today was thinking about compliment for someone near you. And the 2 teachers came to me and were like, I just saw 2 students give compliments to other students that you wouldn't see. And so we haven't seen results quite yet, but I think it's gonna help. And then Dr. Smith created a calming corner in the room right next to Steve Tilley's room with a grant that she got for students to go to and just provide them the space to calm down either by themselves or with an adult. Future work, possibly consider the behavior data as a focus for our school improvement plan, or like how do we monitor more frequently and more regularly with not just the SST team, but with our staff and maybe our guiding coalition. And then the student support team will continue to monitor the data in our monthly meetings and try to produce small wins that we can find. And then get back to our small group and one-on-one groups for students that need some social emotional learning support, kind of like our tier 3 SEL.
Danielle?
And I'm just on a roll. Okay, under future work, small group, one-on-one groups to support students with SEL needs. I'm just gonna call this out. This irked me a little. Like everybody has SEL needs. So do we mean like heightened or more
Sorry, should
specific?
have been more, yeah.
It's I mean, I'm just like, it's a language thing, but like, we all have this. So anyway, just something to ponder. The calming corner, do students like self-select or initiate going there, or are they sent there in lieu of office referrals by teachers, or how does that work?
It's a mix right now. Back to your one-on-one small groups, that was done through our Savers data in the fall. And so we use the data from there to determine like our tier 3 intervention for those groups. So I should be more specific about that, yeah. And then the calming corner, so it's relatively new. I think it like really opened last week. And Dr. Smith actually did lunch bunches with groups of students from every grade level just to talk about what that looked like, to talk about how it's used. And practiced it with some students as well. And so some students are already using it within their plans. Some third graders, who's right there in the 3rd grade corner, automatically just kind of walk down there. We'll get us, radio call or support call to say, hey, someone's using the calling room, someone check on that student and get them back in 5 minutes.
Are you tracking who's using it? And like whether they're referred or kids just showing up there, or is that just kind of anecdotal random information?
It's been locked most of the time. It needs to be unlocked by an adult. And we try not to unlock them if we're notified by somebody.
I wonder if like a sign-in sheet or a thing to just, I mean, that just might be additional information about who's struggling when, or what teachers are sending who when to a common corner and move the office.
Yeah.
Okay, that was it. Yeah.
I would say though, it's not necessarily space that only a struggling student would use. used well, it would be a space that students could also use before they're struggling, ideally, right? To reset, find that, like, if you have a kid who has anxiety, I could picture coming into the schoolhouse, not ready, go to the common corner, gather.
Is that how they're told that's what it's to be used for?
Yeah, I mean, I think they, I had a third grader just yesterday go in there who's shared that they have a headache and are upset about something that happened in recess, because as I was walking by from recess duty, they were sitting in there, so I checked on them and used exactly how you want them to use it in a proactive type of way. rather
Yeah,
than a
it's
reactive.
awesome. I love it.
Those could be student leaders to identify to help other kids.
Yeah.
Figure out how to use it, right?
So sign-in sheet is actually a nice idea.
Yeah.
Just to, and that there's sort of self-empowerment in that,
Yeah.
unless kids don't want to be identified as
Sure.
having used the room.
Yeah.
That's the interesting problem with a sign-in sheet. You go in, you're like, oh, it was in here before
If
me.
a teacher is sending a kid, I would want to know that because is that like they're not dealing with the behavior appropriately or are they using it,
Yeah.
like?
Yeah.
So we've instituted things like mailboxes where you can insert, like, we've instituted things like a check-in sheet where a child will self-monitor, indicate where they're feeling they are right now.
Mm.
They would do their selected things, there would usually be some kind of time limit, you'd have to check in, but then you insert that into a mailbox.
Ah, interesting.
And that
I
way
like that.
there's some,
Yeah.
some privacy, it's not just
Yeah.
available, but that's just an idea, I don't, so.
So all I really want to say is that, I love that you're looking at data. I love what you're describing and the way you're thinking about this. I love seeing in the drop-in office referrals. So, well done. Proud of our schools. Chris? Katie?
I just keep thinking we've come a long way from the buddy rooms.
The nobody rooms.
Yes, those are awful.
Karen?
I think the only additional one is, are the problem solving teams the same thing as the building intervention team, or are those two separate teams?
It's a good question. So part of the PSD process, in the form they create is identifying individuals that you think would either A, give us more information around that student, or you could use support from. So every PST team is different depending on that student and what
Okay.
that teacher filled out. You'll often see allied arts teachers there. They provide a different perspective, and then you'll typically see somebody from the SST team, whether that's Steve or Mr. Trusky or Dr. Rodriguez or somebody else there to provide different insights. And then Dr. Smith are at some depending on who the student are as well, just to help develop those plans. But they always change and they're always different.
Thank you.
Yep.
Great. Okay, attendance.
All right, attendance, and we shared this last time as well, broken down from the average attendance rate and then the demographics. Our attendance dropped in trimester 2 by about a percentage point. However, our number of excused sick absences has increased. Our number of excused absences during the cold and snowy days also we've seen an uptick on as well. And we noticed that as students have gotten older, the attendance increases rates better, which makes sense as our young friends often get sick quite frequently, as my kids do all the time.
Yeah.
It's the last.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love
So we are, some of our responses, we're trying to be as transparent with our caregivers and families as much as possible. So right now, they're receiving tardy letters for 7 tardies or more within a trimester. Then families also receive communication when it's 5-day absence letters and 10 days, excused or unexcused. Ms. Davis, our social worker, does multiple attendance contracts with families throughout the district. Admin and Ms. Davis have visited homes before just to provide supports for different families, whatever they might need to make sure they're at school as much as possible. And then Ms. Davis has collaborated with the resource officer to provide support and clarity with families as well. And then some of our future work have additional supports and information around the importance of attendance, being at school on time during parent-teacher conferences. Dr. Smith has this really cool handout that goes in the Thursday folder. I don't know how often the Thursday folder gets read, right, but sending some of those just present during parent-teacher conferences, probably another opportunity to share with parents. Maintain and develop relationships with families to provide that support for attendance and tardies is important. And then increase consistency of tier 1 information related to the impact and importance of attendance. That's kind of the same thing, first time.
Okay, any questions about attendance, Chris? Katie? I got nothing. Lauren?
Sorry, you guys, I have two, but, I'm just curious, and this is like across both schools, but I was curious about the involvement of the resource officer with regards to attendance. I'm just wondering how we're utilizing them and how that might feel to our families who are having that kind of conflict.
I can speak to that. That's generally a last resort. There could be the potential for a family or two with some very significant tardies. And we have done a significant amount of outreach, home visits, attendance plans, attendance contracts, attempts at attendance contracts with families. And there are times when, like, quite honestly, we're concerned about the student missing school. And then we may then ask for some involvement from the school resource officer.
We have a school resource officer. You're talking
I'm
about
just gonna-
Nicolais?
Yeah, I'm just gonna clarify this,
Thank
like,
you.
when you're
Sorry.
looking at, yeah.
Like.
We do not have a school resource officer here. When we are looking at tardies, one of the last steps in that process of tardying is the ability to go through a citation process around that because of compulsory attendance laws in the state of Wisconsin. So police involvement around that is very much the last leg of that if we cannot get response. And so when we do that, rather than having somebody who has no experience in the schools, we utilize Officer Myers at Nicolais to help support that work, but it doesn't necessarily have to be her, it could be another
Police officer.
but we prefer to use her because she has experience and knows families and will probably then also have continued contact with families, so it can be approached in a more supportive way with her. But that is, I think the number of times we've involved,
Been low.
it's low.
It's like people trigger, like, you have certain thresholds, so like kids will trigger like 30 absences, like so rare.
Is it mandatory to involve a resource officer or the police?
I wouldn't say necessarily mandatory, but I think like, Anna said, or, they are hitting certain thresholds and sometimes it's more of a support as well. So I think we talked about like Denise going to like visit a home, even just being like, an additional voice or an additional person that maybe reach out to a family and things like that. So it's not always even like a citation or things like that. It may just be sometimes another support or another voice to sort of reach a family if we're unable to reach them.
I would assume that we would lose control over what it turns into once you involve the police, whether that's a citation, a fine, introduction to the. So because it's like Glendale has an ordinance, we don't fine people from our district, our community does, or Milwaukee does. So my wondering is, once you ask a police officer to get involved and there's a record, is it out of our hands whether they are fined, introduced into the criminal justice system and that sort of thing?
I think when we're working with Officer Meyer on that, part of the reason why we want to utilize her is that we can utilize her in a more proactive approach rather than just handing it over. In some districts,
That's terrible.
in some districts that can just be like, there's the ability to just hand it over, right? And say, issue the ticket, right? And that's not the way that we're approaching it. We're approaching it by saying, we have tried multiple times and in multiple different ways and with multiple supports and outreaches. And we're not able to leverage right now and getting a kid in school. And sometimes that involves asking for police support to do a well child check because we don't know where the student is. And that is within our means of just making sure that kids are safe is to have somebody go and do a well child check on them. So sometimes it may be something like that, other times it may be, situations where we help reinforce the fact that there is compulsory attendance and that it is in fact an ordinance in the city, and we want to work with you to help support you in getting your child to school and work with you to make that happen. So.
Anything else?
So I realize that attendance, like there's some law around the letters and there's guidance and specifics, but I'm wondering, I've had friends experience this where the letters were sent out even though their children were experiencing medical concerns and it's legally required, and I explained to them it was legally required not to take it personally, but what kind of feedback and support do we give to our families where we recognize that our students are absent because they have medical concerns? And then like what kind of support and plans do we have in place for them that emotionally attends to their needs when we're also sending out these legally mandated pieces of paper that say, hey, your kid is truant, which is a really heavy word to have come at you when you're struggling with some other things. And it's no one's fault here. It's just legally required, right?
I guess Kelly, Willie, Brian, I'd ask to speak to you. I know when I was the principal here, we would go through those letters, and if we know kids are out because they're medically, if we're working with that family in a plan, we pull the letters and don't send them.
You can select, so if
Okay.
you know there's
Yeah.
a child with a history of some pretty serious medical stuff going on, we can deselect those students.
Oh, we
Yeah.
do have some,
Very interesting feedback. Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Suggestions for,
okay,
yeah, other schools.
anything else?
I remember the first, right? I'm just curious if there are any indicators around attendance or data between open enrollment and resident students that there are noticings around that. And if if you see more amongst open enrollment, this is a question, like, I wonder if we're offering supports around like transportation, if that's maybe one of the big, I don't know, so I'm just curious if there's any wonderings or notice. Not like money, but I don't know.
So open enrollment, we do monitor student attendance as a condition of open enrollment status.
Right.
And transportation is the responsibility of the parent
Right.
by state law, so. We work with families to try to support where we can in terms of tools and strategies to make sure we're getting to school on time. We do notice a heavy number of tardiness that comes to our students who are in open enrollment seats. Not
So it's a
all, but
bigger
some.
problem.
Yeah, it's a bigger
That's why I was
problem because you're
curious.
traveling from a farther distance,
Right.
right? And like, it's just a matter of, trying to work and make those plans with families, but. We as a district have sent out, we looked at those students who are falling into that crowded category, being chronically truant or chronically, what is it?
Absent or late.
Or true.
Chronic absenteeism.
Chronic absenteeism. Well, thank you, Kelly. When they fall into that rate, we do send letters to families, letting them know that as a condition of their open enrollment, their seats could potentially be revoked, and we will bring that information forward to the board as we move later into the year to take a look at and review.
Okay, that's happened a couple times on this board in the
No,
past.
right,
It's been
I
a
know,
couple
but
years.
it's been so few and far between that I wondered if it was reflective, if there really was a disparity or a noticing. That's all I got.
Chris? Katie? All right, next, educational extension opportunities, next slide. Hot takes.
Yeah, on this, no, we do decrease typically in winter is targeted travel, and we have a lot of cool activities that planned for the spring as far as like field trips and in-house, we have another reptile. Coming next tomorrow. Reptile for, not even the zoo.
No, I thought you were like
I'm gonna
judging.
Yeah. And then it's not on here, and I didn't even look, but we've had a huge increase in clubs after school at Parkway that I failed to put on here.
That's
Sorry.
okay.
We forgive you.
But I think we had one in the fall and we have six right now. Oh, do I have it in there?
It's in there.
Yes.
Okay,
Awesome stuff.
thank you so much,
Yes.
Mr. Krager.
Great job.
All right, does anybody need a break before we continue to Glen Hills? Is this the time, or can we just forge ahead? Let's forge ahead
Yeah, I'm ready for
if
it.
no one needs, so let's keep going. And then when we're done with this, we'll
General questions because.
yeah, I think so.
Ryan.
I think this will go a little faster, and then once this is done, we will, as a board, regroup and take a quick break and see if there's anything we can cut or decide whether we're gonna stay 15, 20 minutes later. So it's up to, yes, we can decide together. Okay.
Okay.
Glen Hills.
Well, thank you for allowing us to come and speak tonight. We are looking at Glen Hills literacy data, and as you can see, we have a lot of celebrations in our data from fall to winter when it comes to proficiency. So just want to highlight that. One thing that we do want to just keep our eye on is our scholars with 2 or more races who dropped than 0.75%, and from what I understand, that could have been an addition of one student or a subtraction of just one student.
Right.
It's a
So
small group.
it's a very small group.
Those percentages are
A
hard,
number like that,
right?
maybe
Yeah.
percentage jump, yeah.
It's a lot of noise.
So looking, continuing to follow the same scheme that we did with Parkway, looking at ELA data. Just ELA data from the fall to winter, you can see that our school, we have essential standards that we look over and that we focus on, so you can see how we shifted from beginning developing secure from fall to winter in those essential standards. So you can see that we needed to have some good jumps.
I really love seeing the high numbers of students who are actually taking the tests. Yeah, you have nearly universal. It's wonderful.
Yeah, that's one thing that we try to be very consistently in and making sure that everyone takes the start test.
Yeah.
And then that's our 7th and 8th grade as well. So have a chance to look over all that information, especially with our ELA data. It looks promising. Making some good growth. And then as we move on, we see the progress for students receiving literacy intervention. There, as you can see, there is a jump. We did have one of our literacy coaches and interventionists come back from leave, so she was able to support assist extra students as well. So you can see the percentages change and improve because she was able to support really.
Just to clarify, I think it's missing on the slide. You had 27 students in intervention in trimester one.
Okay.
We're up to 40 now. Just because we have a return of another person who can do that work, right? So you can add, so you can support more students in that work.
Does that mean an extra person helps you identify more people, or an extra person just helps you serve more people?
Serve.
Yeah.
So what happens when she's gone to those 13 kids that need service? Yeah, no, yeah.
That's a good point.
You got it.
That's the problem.
Staff matters.
Yeah.
In education.
So as we move to our analysis of the literacy data, we can see that we have improved measures in our essential standards, right? It's great to see. Our response to that was PLTs, common formative assessments, content level collaboration time. We wanted to make sure that our teachers who share the same content had some common level prep. That was one thing that was done by the previous principal. Great foresight, right?
TPP, the previous principal.
So implementation and support. The 95% core for this level 4th and 5th grade students. We want to see every 4th grade and 5th grade teacher making sure that they're doing 95% group with fidelity, so our kids can make that bump and that jump when it comes to literacy. And then 6th through 8th grade curriculum resource review, focus on knowledge-based science of reading, SOR curriculum. And then literacy coaches and interventionists trained in SOR and literacy leadership. So we put a lot of pressure, and I don't say pressure, we put a lot of worth into our coaches and interventionists because they really have a strong say effect on what our kids, how they can improve and how they can grow. So they're learning and becoming leaders every single day. For future work, we continue to work on curriculum review for our middle school. Yep, and then evaluate effectiveness of 95% core with the 5th grade word study curriculum for next year. We want to make sure that it is being having the positive gains that we want to see for our students in 5th graders. Literacy coaches and interventionists along with administration focus on universal instruction within our block schedule. So we always say like what we can do to support kids who have these different type of supports, right? So a student, we may have an IEP or a 504, they get these different additional supports, but it shouldn't just be something that's already done universally throughout the entire class. Everyone should be getting that support. So that's what we're trying to focus on with our coaches and also with our teachers. Yeah.
Universal design.
Yes. Then last but not least, literacy coaches, interventionist training staff, and SOR, and transition third grade personnel reading plans to fourth grade. That's something that will happen hopefully in the summer as we get into next year's student. So the last insight will be the opportunity gap. We can continue to oversee SLOs and reserve classrooms. We were intentional with our teachers SLOs, and we wanted to make sure that they focused on any group of kids. Doesn't matter what group of kids it was, we just wanted to see growth in that group of kids. So that's something that they're working towards, and we're observing. We do our walkthroughs, and we just want to continue to see that growth. And then additional tier 3 groups, making sure that that's happening in the class, and making sure that war is being done with the assistance of our intervention. So our future work will be looking to pilot a new 6th through 8th grade ELA curriculum for the 25-26 school year, and evaluating our 95% for in 4th and 5th grade in the next. Question.
Has Act 20 impacted what you're doing at the middle school at all? Totally ignorant question. It has nothing to do with 4th grade and up, right?
Not yet.
Yeah.
I think
Remind me what an
the
SLO is.
research has though, right? The new research, the science of reading research has, so that when you know more, then you make changes, right? So,
Right.
and then next year with the 4th graders coming up with those personal reading plans, that yes.
Right. Oh, student learning objective. Got it. Okay. Yeah, that's the only question I had. Chris?
No, thank you.
Katie? Karen?
Okay, just two. The first one was that change, there was a pretty significant shift in gender distribution for interventions. Some trimester 1 to trimester 2, is that related to how students are identified for needing intervention, and was it prioritized based on like what caused that change? Because it went from 81% female to 19% female trimester 1 to 43 and 57 trimester 2. And I was just wondering if it was the reintroduction of the second interventionist, and perhaps kids had been prioritized based on depth of need.
Right, it was that, and also some students came out and some students came in, so it wasn't equal by gender that way. So let's.
I mean, I wouldn't expect it to be equal.
Yeah,
but
but you know what I mean.
Profound shift.
It was,
Okay.
it was, but it was all, it's based on tiered. So usually you pick up the 10 percentile below,
Yeah.
and then we went a little further, right,
Yeah.
into 10 through 25th for that next round of pickup for when the interventions came back.
Yeah. My other question, and I think this is the case, but I just wanted to be clear, insufficient data is probably secondary to attendance and ability to participate in interventions.
So yes, it's due
No.
to attendance.
No, it's due to the new interventionist, because you just started and you have to have 6 data points in order to have sufficient.
You have to be in attendance for 6 times.
Yeah.
Come to that.
Yeah.
to-
Okay.
So overall, yes, overall attendance, sorry.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, Danielle?
Yep, okay, Jenica, if you could do the same thing for me with the math and ELA stars, just like the percentage change for the schools, Glen Hill.
Oh, what I shared with you?
Well, this is demographics again. Or somebody can just help me do math and give me a formula and the numbers too, so I can figure it out.
I emailed it to you.
I'm not checking my email, I'm sorry. Jenica. But thank you, but did you share Glen Hills as well?
Yes.
Okay, reading my mind, thank you.
Done.
Love it, love it, love it. Okay, I'm just looking kind of at this future work too, and I love this idea of the coaches and interventionists. training staff and supporting the transition for personal reading plans. Just a suggestion, something to consider. I don't think that I've had literacy coaches or interventionists be part of the transition for my kids from third to fourth on like a 504 or an IEP, but I don't, maybe that, I don't, are they generally part of like student services, like a IEP or 504 team?
So, yeah, so we would have our counselor that would be a part of that.
Right, so I just wonder if they may have not if they're in high demand and short supply, but if they may have some value to add for some kids whose plans may be more heavy, like writing or I don't know, it's just something to think about. That's all. And then I also am curious about tutoring opportunities at Glen Hills. I know there's some happening after school for math maybe. I'm just wondering like if there are those.
Literacy too.
Yeah, so we have that, we'll talk about that when we get to the after school program.
Oh,
but
okay.
That is something that tutoring happens after school on Thursdays with math and ELA.
I do see that on my district calendar, so I just wonder if that is something to kind of incorporate into our response or future work around opportunity gaps. I'm just really interested in research right now that's coming out that's talking about the impact on moving kids toward, and moving them. Moving them and wanting to just know how you guys and if you guys are thinking about how could we beef up tutoring, one-on-one tutoring, using technology for tutoring and like really, work to close some of these gaps and like move our kids forward. So
Yeah, so tutoring is definitely on my mind, tutoring and mentoring is definitely on my mind, so hopefully next year we can get some more tutors into the school and some more mentors into the school.
okay, good.
I'm gonna go off, because I love the idea of mentors, like non-subject matter mentors, because what I'm starting to observe is that sometimes when we track data and development in particular skill areas, we spend less time focusing on like general learning skills, problem solving, time management, skill development of how do you develop skills, you know what I mean? So when you say mentor, that triggers me to think about that, like how do you help kids learn learning skills that can then apply universally across subject matters, so just, I love that idea.
Love that idea as well, that we do also have a ARC class that focuses on soft skills. So it's not in every grade currently, but it is in our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade.
Awesome. Anything else? Okay, moving on to math. Or were we already on math?
That was our literacy day.
That was lit, yeah, we're on math now.
Hot takes, I encourage hot takes at this point, because we have the data here.
Yeah, so very similar to our ELA or literacy data, you can see that we have a lot of celebration when it comes to our STAR growth and proficiency. Again, we have our students who are one or more races that dropped 6.1%, but again, that's attributed to maybe one student coming in that was not where they needed to be, and compared to a student who left that was at a higher space. Move on to the essential standards math data. You can see that we did make some improvements, but as we spoke about last time that we met, that last section in math, we're not seeing the most growth because it hasn't been taught yet.
Right.
In our curriculum ways rolled out. So we are looking for ways to supplement that so that kids can get that, and it's not just something that happens at the end of the year. So that is in the works. But there's still some good jumps in every grade, so it's a lot of celebrations that we have. And then our insights will be growth in all 4th and 8th grade essential standards, 5% or higher proficiency growth on STAR for Hispanic, EL students, or EL students with IEPs and economically disadvantaged, and a 6% decrease on STAR proficiency for 2 or more races. So our response to this was during the 3rd trimester, we should see students learning the newer standards that I just talked about. being reteaching and taught the standards that are not being mastered. These standards will be progress monitored through common performance and assessments. POT team discussion of data during data delve to determine research-based instructional practices to support their students. Addition of math, fact lab programming in 4th and 5th grade to shore up fact fluency, excuse me, and domain 2 and 3 walkthrough that providing staff with feedback. So currently, myself and other administrators in the district are walking through both schools just to give feedback around domain 2 and domain 3. Look at educator effectiveness. Look at the Danielson framework, domain 2 and 3, where you can walk through providing feedback to teachers about what looks good in their classroom, what they can or improve. In our future work, which is, down the line, is the creation of CFAs for essential standards to be used during POTs and the use of STAR for efficiency and systems work, and then analyze data from the math fact lab to determine if it is supporting fact fluency. You just want to make sure that whatever we're doing is fruitful and it's being beneficial for our students.
Okay, I think it's your turn to go first, Chris. Questions, comments?
Just that I really appreciate, the analysis part of this meeting. I appreciate, all of your insights and projections into the future, so thank you.
100% honest with you, that was the most difficult part of this. We do so much, it's just hard for us to sit down and really reflect on everything that we do, but it's here. This is not everything. It's not everything, but there's some things that we're doing.
Thank you.
Everything else is a number poll.
Yes.
I do have a question. I know that, last year, our first board meeting as members, they discussed changing how we do the math program here. They're not doing advanced math from, like, basically the kids are in and now will roll through with the,
Yes.
are you seeing changes around that?
So we currently, we don't have that advanced math class in 6th grade. And I can tell you that it's helpful for me when it comes to scheduling kids classes. But as far as our 7th and 8th graders, we still have some things to work around. And hopefully, as time rolls, we can get more diverse and a more heterogeneous mixture of kids.
I can speak to that too. I'm working with math coaches to prepare a report for an April board meeting on the data that we collected over the school year and to make some recommendations for the upcoming next year to continue on our plan. Okay, so that'll be a part of a future board meeting.
Garn?
No questions.
Who are you? What have you done with Garn?
Oh, but I do love your glasses.
I would think that
Danielle?
I'm not gonna read the request. Two quick questions. Are there any particular things that admin or teachers are doing that you wanna attribute this growth to? Math, are there changes we've made or new things we're implementing or what are you feeling shift, if anything?
Ooh,
I want to know more about that, but maybe.
I would say consistency in school, right? We last year we had a lot of 3-day weeks, 4-day weeks due to PD, due to whatever, right? But now we have more consistent time in front of kids and they have more time learning, more I would say more hours because it was 7 hours. It's just more consistency throughout weeks without so many breaks. So we can get that, see those kids learning more and getting more at bats because they're in the school building and longer.
And then I'm just curious, what is the vibes or response to these domain and 2, 3 walkthroughs, you guys going through the buildings, providing feedback? I'm curious, is that new and uncomfortable for teachers or staff, or are they like open, or maybe it's a mix, I don't know, I'm just curious.
The purpose of that work is not necessarily to, I mean, we want to provide feedback, because that was part of the feedback we got from teachers, is we want your feedback, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Which is fair. Part of the work around that is building coherence around the administrative team and the way that they're looking at that. So we did educator effectiveness training around removing bias from our thinking around teacher practice and looking at those components. And then what you're doing when you go into that is saying, here are markers on the Danielson framework and Danielson framework look fors. We go in and we watch, and then we walk out, and I may say to Leon, these are the things I observed. Like, are you seeing the same things in these categories? And we're norming around whether or not. So what that looked like with domain 2, which is about building positive relationships in the classroom and culture in the classroom, was then we were able to say to teachers, this is what we saw when we were teaching you that we thought good looks like. So there's clarity for administrators, then there becomes clarity for teachers, and then we have more coherence as an institution around how we're meeting the needs of students. And making sure that our practices are aligned. So that's the goal. So we're still collecting information in domain 3 for our purposes.
Okay.
So we're giving them feedback in domain 2 because we've had the opportunity to say, this is what we think good looks like in domain 2. So, hey, guess what? Really happy we saw these things.
Yeah.
Like, and then have you thought about, and then we're thinking about the domain 3 work behind the scenes still, because we haven't reached that
Right.
consensus yet.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm happy I didn't read the room and I asked that question, because I love that. That's just amazing. That's awesome.
No, but we had some teachers that were, like, oh, they're in my class, is that? Right.
Yeah.
But,
Sure, the more you do that.
and the more we do it, the more they're getting used to us being in there, they're just,
Norming that.
they're just in their environment, they're teaching.
And it's a nice idea of the feedback loop, that it's less about judgment
Mhm.
and more about growth.
Yep.
It's all about growth and mutual growth as you observe in different classes and you learn what the best practices are and. Am I?
No, I'm done.
I'm curious whether you're tracking, like finding ways to look at where you see good practices are happening and where you observe weakness, and whether you're looking at data and if you're looking at outcomes in classrooms disaggregated to see how teachers are doing. Or how students are doing in classes, which I know can be
Yeah.
lots of issues, but you know what I mean?
Like, as administrators, of course, we look into segregated data by classrooms and teachers, right?
Okay.
That's something that we do. When we're looking at the culmination of this data, what we're looking at is what we're seeing in practice, and we're pulling that into a table to say, in general, if these are what Danielson ranks as being high leverage strategies underneath this domain, what are we seeing, what are we not seeing? So then that gives us opportunities to do overall development with teachers to say, here are some ways to beef that up, right?
Right.
What I would say we're not doing is saying, we're putting that feedback in general, we're not tying it to a specific teacher, because it's not evaluative of that teacher.
Right.
Our evaluation system sits separate than that. Right now, all we're doing is pulling information about what we are, those trends and patterns to help us know where teachers need to be developed. Right?
Yeah. That's more collaborative, but evaluative in a way.
Yeah, we have an evaluation system that utilize. What we're doing is norming around our evaluation system and how we perceive it, so that we can get better at giving people that evaluative feedback in the future and tying it to their performance of students.
I was done.
Okay. No, I'm just tagging on. I'm curious about on the math numbers, when I see that. In the winter, you're up to, I'm seeing ranges of like. Pretty low percentages in the secure category, right? You still have about half your kids, I think, and just roughing, about half your kids are still at the beginning of mastery. Are these numbers like curved about where you would expect them to be? Like, what would you be looking for secure in math by the end of the school year, by the time you get to round 3? What would feel like success? 100%, right? Yeah. I'm talking about like, as I look at the grade levels and the essential standards, I see for winter, in the 20s, teens, 20s for secure. And I'm curious whether that's in line with what you would expect to see as you move into trimester 3 and work towards growing that number.
And also our school goal is 100%, so it will be proficient proficient in, the central standards and academics. So that is our goal.
Yeah.
And just to note, those are essential standards. Those are what our partner districts all norm priority standards.
Right.
And then from those priority standards, our district has identified what we think are the key essential standards.
Right, that's what these are.
Yeah, and that's what these are. That doesn't necessarily reflect overall proficiency.
Right.
But what this would look at predictively, if you look at overall proficiency, is where do our students, where will they likely score? If we look at our forward results in math from last school year, you would see that what we're seeing here is somewhat on trend with what we saw last year in terms of that, which means there still is a lot of room for improvement. So,
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, since this is only our second year working through the essential standards too, right? It's a long process because they build upon each other. So some of the reflective data, like some of it is gonna build onto each other for years to come that you're not gonna see for 5 to 6 years down the road because those essential standards build on each other from
Right.
elementary school
Mhm.
into middle school. And so I think we also are just new to the essential.
Well, and
standards, too.
that's what I see. This trend is like the number goes down as you head towards 8th grade. And I'm wondering if there's some stacking effect that hasn't worked its way through the system yet.
Yep.
As you,
Yep.
okay.
I think one thing too is to like celebrate the developing group as well, right?
Right,
So
right.
Sometimes, you wanna focus on growth, right?
Yeah.
So there's a kid, there may be a kid who, individually, I may not have made it to secure. Or even if I'm in the beginning and I barely got into developing, but if I seen that growth, that motivation piece may help support me, if not now, eventually. So,
Right.
we wanna highlight that growth.
Yeah, yeah. And I see it. I'm just curious where you're looking for that to learn. Okay. Anyone else? Chris? Katie? Lauren? All right. Excellent. Thank you. Onward, behavior.
All right, we can, jump into behavior. So we're looking here at office managed suspension and pre-expulsion. We are comparing trimester 1, trimester 2, and I would say, as you see numbers, especially when you look at grades like 7th grade or any outliers, right? Don't at times maybe get caught up in the numbers because we can show where a lot of work is happening there. And sometimes too, we are, as we talk about teacher development and things like that, they are, looking at ways that they may input more data into, these numbers showing. So maybe we're getting more feedback around some of these inputs. So obviously, though, office management means, hey, we needed some support if they were sent to maybe admin and things like that, right? And so I think highlights were or are as we look at insights. So you see a decrease in suspensions for grades 4, 5, 6, and 8. And as we just go across the response for that, grade level EduClimber data died. And so how do we look at that data, right? Restorative conversations, right? And so as you see that decrease in suspensions, bringing those students into spaces where they can sort of restore what we call restoring the harm, and then essentially go back into the environment and sort of work on the tasks or the goals and things that they work on those restorative conversations. Sometimes a lot of times that is more important than an out of school suspension, which now takes you away from the education. It was important for us to highlight parents as partners. I know here we've really had an uptick in when we see sort of those trends in that data and that behavior. Hey, it may be time to bring a family or caregiver in and just say, hey, what's not working here? And sometimes parents give you a little bit of insight on what works for them, and then we can't do everything a parent can do, but just knowing that they are in the space and the building sometimes helps turn the trend around some of those behaviors. So that parents as partners piece is huge. And then there again, one of the things that we've come up with recently was what we call like spring suggested conferences. And so as again, you look at that data, so there's some students who may have an uptick in that EduClimber behavior data, or even an uptick in, or we need more supports around academic pieces. And so when we look at those students, we wanted to have an opportunity for teachers to reach out to those families specifically to invite them to conferences just a few days prior to the form coming out. So we call that like a priority reach out. And that wasn't connected to any demographic data. There was all students, we just looked at the numbers, right? Insights, decrease in suspension. So now we're looking at school-wide. Mr. Williams talked a lot about, the work that we've done with like SSTs and coaches. We looked at the data protocol, I believe. Ms. Weiss sort of supported us in, or that was already a school thing, I'm sure how the protocol came about. But it just sort of gave us a guide or framework and sort of how to look at that data, right? As a team. Mr. Williams, recently, handed to teachers a tier 1 self-assessment to identify strengths and opportunities for growth. So as they looked at their tier 1 assessment, they were able to see, hey, I'm really strong in these areas, and I may need some support in these areas. And when we look at that as a PD, we provided an opportunity for teachers to sort of look across the room and see that they have colleagues in the room that may be strong in the area that they're weak in. And we provide an opportunity for those to have conversations with their own colleagues. And the goal there was, hopefully that provides an opportunity in the future where you may not need admin to support you in that, because I know right away, hey, I can go to Karen because she's really good at blah, blah, blah. Because have that tier 1 conversation.
You're getting peer support,
Peer
peer
support.
mentoring.
Yeah.
I like that.
And then future work, again, the staff focus on routines and procedures. I think that, again, sort of tied to some of their tier work, that tier 1 work, but then just again, it's sort of that, I think of like the mirror in the window, right? Sometimes you look in the mirror and say, hey, it's me that I can support this, or look in the mirror and say, it's them, they're the reason, right? And so that again, provided an opportunity to say, hey, are your procedures at play? Are your things in your classroom supporting student to have an opportunity to be fully successful before you say that there's a behavior concern, right? Is the classroom set up for them to be successful? And that's kind of where we wanted to go with that. Insights is, we talked about an increase in referrals, but a decrease in suspension. So we're talking about those, office referrals. So improved tier 1 teacher strategies, micro moves. And so that was an opportunity for our coaches to sort of look at, or SST, to look at tier 1 strategies that may support teachers in the classroom, and then provide those dosing PDs and like those Monday morning stand-up meetings where, we essentially try to increase their tool belt, essentially. And then we had a wellness Wednesday schedule change. I think that came about with conversations that we had with the coalition. And then that conversation led to us going back to our staff, and the staff's, just in feedback around data saying, hey, there's a time of day that seems to be a little bit more successful. Can we try this? They brought it to Mr. Williams, and then we had that turnaround. Their teachers are giving positive feedback that they now feel that Wellness Wednesday it's kind of running in the direction that they probably wanted to go in the first place. And it was just a time change. So everything else is still at play. The time of day kind of mattered to the kids, right? Instead of that end of the day, we put it to the beginning of the day where kids are a little bit more receiving of that information. And so we're working with CISA to refine our MLSS. And then and I know that the group met today to begin that work around the CEL curriculum review. And in that review, we also included stakeholders, meaning I believe we had staff, students, and I believe community outreach, if that's correct. Parents, yep. Any questions around behavior?
I don't remember who I'm on. Katie? I try to rotate who starts, but.
Bold, you go around. 7th grade, like, I have a 7th grader, I see it from her perspective, certainly, but like, what's going on there? Hormones?
I think it's everybody else needs to get chime here, but what I've learned from that group, whose relationship in terms of like relationship to student to staff, student to building, student to community, student to student, right? They are a core group that sort of moves as a unit.
That's right.
And in the places that they are the most successful, I believe, is where you see the teachers building that sort of that best culture, that space. And it takes a little bit of time to sort of break through to them. I'm not familiar as familiar with like historically how they were, but I see that for sure. And essentially, I think that it just takes a little bit more time and work with them. You have to just try different things, essentially, to sort of support them.
They're our most enthusiastic group, right? They deserve a lot of attention because they are so very special, right? In I look at them as our future leaders as of our school and of Nicolay or wherever they decide to go. They have such strong, very strong personality. But they also are huge advocates for themselves.
Yeah.
Right? And that's a trait that we're looking for in all of our students and even in grown-ups, right? Advocating for themselves. So they may not have the tools right now to do it in the most effective way.
I see, so because the referral number was high last trimester and it's.
Yes.
Yeah, this trimester, so are you saying that, seeing that as like a clash between these like big personalities and that kind of group? That family setup that they have and the staff, is that what's happening there, or?
Staff have high expectations. And
Okay.
they're holding that group or that grade level to those high expectations.
Okay,
And when they hold them to those high expectations, some of those students decide to voice their concerns in a way that they have learned, right?
right,
We need to teach them how to handle those conversations in a more respectful, school-led way, right? So they are always growing. They are seventh grade kids, and we know seventh grade is the toughest year
yeah.
of middle school.
Mhm.
But I've seen so much growth in those kids. From just from the beginning of this year to where we are now.
Yeah.
Where I'm confident that I can have my seventh graders be leaders to welcome our new third graders in when we have our third graders come in March, April, May. So like I can identify those kids right now.
Okay.
So yes, they do have a lot of referrals. But they're growing every single day and they're going to be ready and they're gonna rise to the occasion. I know they will and I've seen it.
Okay, yeah. Well, I want you to know that that's kind of what I see from my side too, but I wanted to make sure, you know, that what my seventh grader is telling me may or may not jive, so I'm glad that it kind of does.
Oh, yes.
We're working on that stuff. There's no excuses, yeah, we're working on it all. The next piece is, I'm sorry.
Karen, do you have any questions? No. Danielle?
I do. Okay, I'll, sorry.
You wanna
Okay.
look for it?
No, got it, it's okay. I am wondering about, okay, next time this data comes around, I'd be curious to know about a breakdown of suspensions, so like if there is one in school, out of school days. Okay, so all suspensions are in school. Oh, all are out of school.
Yes.
Then the follow-up question though is that an office managed referral for me to wrap my head around that, is that a student being sent to the office?
Yes.
And so at what point so a student being sent to the office, is there ever a world in which they're there all day and that's an in-school suspension, but it's not required? No, okay, so there's no like, it's usually handled within enough time that you're not thinking, okay, that's, okay, thank you. And then also just something for the future, thinking about behavior referrals, like you still use the behavioral matrix and, right? So I'm wondering, like, seeing a breakdown of like, how many of these behaviors are related to like phone usage technology versus other things? So I mean, that would be interesting to know because that's good information for us. And when you say behaviors, you know, we are all have bad behaviors with our phones, I think. So I mean, I feel like there's less judgment or stigma if some of that's broken out for us potentially and gives us tools to think about helping kids in that way, right?
And I say we do share that breakdown as we have data conversations.
Yeah, so I would just love to see it next time, whatever. And then that connects to my wondering about like, thinking about if you are seeing times of day where kids are like, whatever, and they mentioned this in Parkway too, recess and lunch. Makes me think about nutrition, time for movement, wellness, is this something
Outside.
wellness committee could be looking at in terms of behaviors again? And are we getting enough movement? What does the nutrition look like for, you know, our kids? I think that's all connected. So I'm just like, these are suggestions for thinking about future work and your insights as you move forward. And then the last thing is just,
parents as partners. So there's also some room there to kind of, to even, I think, incorporate that more in your analysis. I'm thinking about teaching to the edges with SEL. I get blank worksheets home that I see like as an SEL lesson my kid did in class that's not filled out, but I'm not connected to it. I wonder if there's a opportunity to share with parents the SEL piece we are working on, because a lot of behaviors are, I see my kids reflect back to me my behaviors, right? So it's what's being modeled for them potentially in community, at home, on TV, wherever, all these other pieces. So I, as a parent, could partner by knowing, like, how can I reflect what they're working on with those pieces at school, like more intimately. And I think that's it.
That's the feedback that we got from our parents. They looked at that during the SEL curriculum review today. That they don't really know much about that, right? That's the curriculum that we use. So how can we give them the tools to be prepared when their kids come home? Talk about, we had SEL, we had wellness Wednesday today. We want to make sure that parents are in the know.
Or they don't talk about it, which is my experience, and then I say, what was that? I don't remember. Okay, great. And similarly around like digital literacy and citizenship, like, please share that information with me, I could use it, right? I think we all could. So knowing those are just pieces where you can build partnership through I mean, that's a flyer home that could be passive. And I prefer a flyer to a Thursday folder if it's like something you really want to get in my face. But yeah, but also then you can work up to it being less passive and more about engagement. I'm done, thank you.
My reflections, I'm sitting here thinking, I actually expected to see an uptick. A significant uptick in trimester 2, just thinking about world events in American politics. I am observing in our community a tremendous amount of stress among students and families. So well done, these numbers. To me, this is a wonderful surprise and a sign that you're keeping a schoolhouse that's safe and healthy. And I also want to say, I mean, and as part of that reflection, I sit here thinking, I love the way you love the 7th graders. Because, and I'll tell you why, because you see the strength and power in them. And I know we need to bring respect and, you know, some sense of, I guess, hierarchy into these schoolhouses. But let's face it, the history of change in America and the world is built on the backs of disruptors and dissenters. And so I appreciate that you don't want to break them, because when we talk about a call to action, you know, if people have the guts to speak and disrupt in the right place and the right time, empowered with knowledge and learning and choice, man, those are the people who can change the world. So I don't want you to let go of that belief in the power of kids who are disruptors. It's just a question of when and why, right? You're gonna disrupt because someone's got their shoelace on your chair, or are you gonna disrupt because there's a real justice issue, right? You know, are you gonna disrupt because you're helping someone who is vulnerable and they need your support as a friend and ally, or are you mad because, you know, someone did, you know, I mean, there's a question of triviality and importance, but I just love that you honor that in them. And so I just want to thank you for that. That just really resonates in me, so.
There just has to be a way that you do that, right?
Yeah.
You can't swear, cuss, and cause that type of scene, because then your message won't get across.
Right.
And that's what's happening with some of our kids.
Right.
They feel like there's been an injustice. The way that they display it isn't the right way. It isn't being received. So that's what we're trying to teach our kids.
It feels like you guys don't see them so much as a problem as like definitely some administrators would. You see them as a growth opportunity.
It's definitely a growth opportunity.
Well,
There are kids.
Yeah.
Language matters.
Like we-
Stories we tell about those particular kids in this particular schoolhouse matters. So the way you tell us their story, I mean, I'm sure it builds confidence in you and all of you as adults for them to feel safe to like grow.
And like, we're just
Great.
around them so much, so.
Relationship thing, right?
Yeah.
You're sitting in their classroom, we're walking in the hall,
Yeah,
we're sitting in the hallway, we see them in
Yeah.
a way that's just like, it's a little different.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Absolutely.
But when I asked my question, you smiled.
Yeah.
I was like, what is going on with them? And you're like, yeah.
Because, I mean,
Let it
we spend a lot of time with them.
Yeah.
You know, for us to get here.
I
Chris, do you have any questions or thoughts?
Or did I already reach you?
Just,
Can't remember.
thank you. I appreciate your assets-based focus.
Mhm.
And I feel good about the kids being in your hands.
All right. Is that it? Attendance.
And Mr. Prager sort of touched on some of these pieces. We are pretty steady with attendance. We are improving across demographics. And we will sort of just jump to our response and future work in terms of how we do that. It's pretty similar to where we do share or work with Ms. Davis, who goes back and forth and supports us in this. On our side, at times we do bring another conversation to, talking about like health things and other. So there were some kids where, we've invited Edson, who's our school, is he our district nurse or school? District nurse, where she's come to a few of our meetings and sort of make a family feel a little bit more supportive around letting us support maybe I don't want to put levels to health, but there are some things that maybe we can support you with in school. And so those conversations are had at times when Ms. Estes join some of those family meetings as well. So insights are different across all grade levels, trimester 1 and trimester 2. Students with special education needs continue to lag with attendance. Our Hispanic students have had the lowest overall attendance rate during trimester 2 compared to all demographic groups. And again, that could be, percentages and numbers. We have to look a little bit deeper into that.
Sure.
Similar responses, families and caregivers getting charity letters. Different thresholds, 5 days, 10 days, and so on. Again, Ms. Davis, school social workers, attendance meetings, attendance contracts, meetings with families, collaboration with additional supports, IEP teams and even IEP process. And so again, when students who have an IEP as a support, we do have to take a little bit of a different route to support them, but we do for the most part continue the same process. And our future work is ensure our staff are looking at attendance trends. And that's, one thing I know Ms. Williams talked about, like we just put data in front of us has been probably a theme throughout the school year. And I know I forget your quote, Anna, where you said data, not data driven, but data.
We're student focused and we use data to drive decisions.
Right, we use data to drive decisions, right? So I definitely know that that's a theme here. Continued response to that data and then providing mental health, counseling, SEL supports. And so even when I think Mr. Prager said culture, our culture section, I guess we could change that because sometimes behavior sounds negative. Right? When we talk about behavior is communication, really, right? So I think even just changing that framework of thinking around just our overall culture piece. And again, these pieces play a role in that mental health, counseling, SEL. So when we talk about how we support, it's a lot of people and a lot of things that may be supporting that behavior, right? Because it's, it can be a lot
Lack
of
of
things.
connection.
It can be a lot of things. Yeah.
Okay, questions, comments about attendance, Karen?
I would just say, I appreciate all the work you guys are doing, and attendance is really, really, really essential. I will say, as someone who participates in a different district, I really love the fact that our concerns are not even dipping below 90, other than like a particular isolated subset that might be related to enrollment, right? And so I just would say, in general, I'm really, really glad to see that our numbers are actually relatively strong. Not to say there's not work to do within our district, but to recognize like, actually, we look pretty good. These are, when I see these numbers for what I do, I'm super excited.
2 thumbs up.
Especially during cold and flu season.
Oh my God.
Danielle? Nothing. Chris?
All right, last but not least, educational extension opportunities. So you see our field trips, we really didn't have many field trips this year, this trimester for our 4th and 5th graders. We did have Starbase was a 5th grade trip that was going to be utilized by Ms. Morale and the 5th grade team, and we'll be taking different sections of 5th grade to Starbase. However, They
And then
lost
what
funding.
happened?
They lost
Oh,
funding, so
shut down.
I'm not gonna say what actually led to that, because I don't know
Call the
100%.
office.
So I'm not sure, but they lost funding, so, but Ms. Morale and the fifth grade team have been working diligently to find some field trips for fifth grade during the third trimester, so we should see this filled in for the third trimester. We've had one in-house presentation for every grade. That was Nicolay when they came over, and the orchestra came, the band came, the theater club, they all came and put on a presentation for the whole school. After school activities look pretty much the same, but athletics, we, this term or this trimester, we don't have any fourth graders. Because there aren't many athletics for those fourth graders in the winter months. Now, in the fall, we have cross country, but we don't have anything.
Wrestling, is wrestling on? Oh, okay.
So
Busy after school.
it is very busy after school, but our talent development events, you can see that we had our spelling bee for every single grade. We had our Empower Leadership Camp with the Green Bay Packers, with our sixth graders, or some of our sixth graders. Future City this year, sixth grade and eighth grade representing Glen Hills Middle School. And then we
Second
had,
grade one too.
they went,
Yeah, they got pulled in at the last minute.
oh, see, look,
Yeah.
things I don't know. Thank you for filling that in for me. Drone Academy for our eighth graders as well, a small select group for our eighth graders, they went to Drone Academy. And then you can see that we had many concerts and events, Black History Program, winter concerts and orchestra, band, and choir, and oh yeah, just a lot during our winter months. And also shout out to our eighth grade team. They went to Radio Milwaukee, they went to UWM, they went to the Milwaukee Public Museum, they went to the Admirals game with Miss Miracle, and then they also performed at Bayshore Hall with Miss Miracle on this day. So Glen Hills is a wonderful place to get all your needs met, academically, culture wise.
Put it on the billboard there.
Yeah.
Sounds like it comes like stuff.
I just have one boomer question.
Yes,
Drone Academy is not about bees.
no,
Oh my God.
not at all.
Oh, stop.
Is it about flying drones?
It's
Yeah.
flying drones.
Okay, just making sure I got that right.
Oh my God.
All right, any questions or comments? Danielle is nodding, so.
Just a note for next time is if you could do comparison to trimester one,
Okay,
that would be helpful. Future agenda item, perhaps I'd love to revisit the just after school club activities, the fiscal impact of those, like 50 athletics and 40, that's just like, sounds like a crazy amount, so in terms of like the fiscal impact of that and checking it on tracking like demographics and participation and data would be awesome. And then our talent development events accessible to everyone, like is the spelling bee compulsory? You said some sixth grade kids go to Empower Leadership Camp, some eighth graders go to Drone Academy. Future City, I believe, is like you opt in, you like self-initiate. So which like are any, like, I'm just wondering,
Spelling bee was open to every scholar in the entire school.
open and compulsory, or like just open, you can participate if you want? It's like, do you have a spelling bee in a class and then the winner of that
In the
class?
and then it moves on.
And the kids in that class can decide to participate or not, or they all participate?
All participate in the class, and then they.
That's the
single-
whole- I mean, that is-
Single it down, and then that single down group
That's
goes
compulsory
to
to
the
me.
bigger.
Okay.
Spelling bee that's
Okay.
in our conference.
Okay, and then what about the other, like Empower Leadership Camp and Drone Academy?
That was decided by the sixth grade team. Well, it's a small group of kids to that with.
So teacher nominated.
Yeah,
Teacher nominated students to go over a diverse, I mean, I will say in many of these things, there's not like a graded criteria or I guess, like test score criteria, it's more
No,
like
it's like
who
teachers.
did and so. Ms. Morale would seek recommendations from teachers
Okay.
around which students would benefit from those opportunities.
And can students self-nominate for these activities? Oh, a question for a later time that I'd love to follow up on talent development to also understand similar to after-school clubs. Demographics, participation, and like the layout of what these events look like, so just to have a better understanding. That's it.
Your spelling bee question, it's compulsory in the classroom, but if
Yeah.
you don't wanna compete at the school level. then-
Okay, no, but I mean, that's an opportunity where you don't really get to opt out. At
You
least
do it
on
at school level.
but at least on one, like, it's open to everybody, it's accessible to
Yeah.
everyone, it's inclusive.
Yes.
And then it's up to them if they want.
Right, my kids always call it.
Right, that's what I was trying to get, yeah,
All done, Chris, Katie, Lauren? Thank you,
Thank
gentlemen.
you.
All three gentlemen, wonderful. I'm reminded that last time I said, we did this, I said, and then I forgot that we should do these as a separate workshop.
Hmm.
With nothing else on the agenda,
Yeah.
you know, because we have so much curiosity on this board and you bring us so much wonderful information.
Yeah, and you all had such good insights.
Yeah.
It was really helpful.
I know
And I
we're
love
going
hearing you
long,
brag on the
but
seventh graders.
thank you for being
yeah, thank
willing
you.
to go along with us.
No problem. Thank you for having us.
We're really loving it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All administrators, thank you very much.
Just because of you, I'm right back to you. We're on a glass.
Okay, before we break,
You want a motion to post?
hold on.
Sorry.
We still have on our agenda superintendent update, developmental disability resolution, staffing changes, and a closed session. Those are the substantive issues.
Can I make a recommendation?
Please, yes.
I would recommend that we move to tidy up 5A and we postpone the rest of them. We talked about doing a workshop on the 12th. We move these items to the 12th and do a meeting with the workshop to follow.
Wait, do a meeting on the next week
Front end.
and then follow it with the workshop.
And
That's a
follow
great
the
idea.
workshop, and then the only item that we would move to beyond the presentation of schools tonight would be 5A and everything else would push.
Oh, you want to push 5B too?
Can we,
I only want to address 5A.
can I push back and ask that we also consider the developmental disability month resolution? That'll take like 5 to 10 minutes because it's the beginning of the month, just get it done.
If we're not doing closed session administrative, you're saying push that
So all we would be doing is staffing changes on Anna's
and the
recommendation.
resolution.
Again, I am perfectly fine with people saying, no, we have to only do essentials, but it would be nice to get that resolution in place at the first meeting of the month.
And that was one of our goals to do.
I will,
So if we're gonna do that, are you comfortable with that, Anna, or do you just wanna get us out of here as fast as you can?
No, I'm fine.
Okay, because I think if we do those two things, we can finish it in like 15 to 20 minutes. So we would be looking to table items 4A,
want me to make the motion?
5B, and C. And that's it, right? Okay, yeah, you wanna,
Sure.
so we're
So-
tabling it to next week.
Yeah, I move to table the following agenda items to a special meeting ahead of our advocacy workshop next week, Wednesday, March 12th. And those items are item 4A, or superintendent update, item 5B, closed session administrative contracts. I also would move to, can I include the board meeting debrief, just, we don't need.
Yeah, every 5B and forward.
Yeah, correct. Yes. I move to table everything from 4A and then 5B forward for the remainder of the meeting through adjournment. Second.
All in favor?
I moved to break.
Okay,
Okay.
let's take a 5-minute break.
Okay.
I'm gonna put on a timer and we'll start correctly. Is that okay? Where's my phone?
You're starting.
Where's my phone?
Especially through the stream was good.
Don't have to stay, do you?
That was such a great.
Crazy kid.
Yeah, they was really
Yeah.
good.
To me?
No,
I know. I know. I don't have a task. People call you on this.
Oh, there.
Yeah.
Are we back on camera?
Good night.
Great, good night.
Thank you so much.
All right, next on the agenda, on the remaining agenda, is the resolution in recognition of Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month.
I took last year's and I revised it a little, and I know it's late, so I won't say all the things I wanted to say, but I wanted to share with whoever's listening, how important this has been to me as I work through this and do my background research. And this morning I was triggered up because my daughter, who's a freshman in college, texted me and said, I'm really scared about what's gonna happen in the future. And I thought she was talking about her grades and her worries, and she said, no, I'm thinking about what's happening in our world and in politics, and I'm scared that they won't let kids with disabilities go to school anymore or go to regular schools anymore. And it bumped me. She didn't know I was working on this, but it knocked me out of my orbit because I don't know that her worry is unfounded as we look into the future. And so I want to stress how this isn't just paper to me. We do these resolutions because this is the role we fill as board members. But this is real. This work is real, and the advocacy we have to do in the years ahead is real. 1 in 6 kids has a developmental disability. It's normal. It's life, it's humanity, and yet people with disabilities continue to face significant obstacles to equitable access in education and work and everything. And one of the biggest obstacles we face here in Wisconsin that we have power as advocates to fight is Wisconsin legislature's perpetual underfunding of mandated special education costs in public schools. And I know I don't need to preach to all of you about how the 30% funding of mandated special education expenses is not fair, how open enrollment is not fair because it's too expensive to take kids with special education needs. The voucher program is unfair because kids who use special education vouchers have to waive their critical rights under the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act. It's just not fair. The financial barriers that kids are now going to be facing, people with disabilities, Medicaid funding, it's creating existential fears for people with disabilities who rely on Medicaid funding to live a life of meaning, to live independently, to enter the workforce, to find necessary supports in school and at home and in work, and stigma, bias, fear. We have a person leading this country who has mocked a person with a disability and still got elected. And none of this is fair or equitable and just. And I'm reminding myself, 100 years ago, mandatory sterilization, compulsory sterilization was deemed constitutional. I know we're not there anymore. I know we don't have ugly laws in cities anymore where you could be picked up and arrested just for being perceived to have a disability, but we still have so much work to do. And I was reminded that, the Civil Rights Act in '64 excluded people with disabilities. It took almost 30 years to get civil rights protections for people with disabilities. It wasn't until 2009 that Rosa's Law was passed to remove the words mental retardation from federal and educational usage and replace it with intellectual disability. We just keep moving forward. And we just have to keep fighting. So re-exploring this history, watching video of the Capitol crawl, all know about the Capitol crawl, where people who were mobile with devices just got so sick of the stalling on the ADA, the 1990 Americans with Disabilities Act, that they went to the US Capitol, they got themselves out of their wheelchairs, they threw away their, whatever they used to move, and they crawled in whatever way they could up the steps of the Capitol. Go find the video if you haven't seen it. It is profound and powerful, and I think important for us to think of right now because it's an image of something a lot of people would perceive as weak and fragile and vulnerable, and they just turned it into power because that protest was one of the keys that moved the Americans with Disability Act through. And so I would just encourage all of us here as we move into advocacy season to know that our weakness is strength. If we can find a way to make it that, I'm going to make myself cry. We just have to keep celebrating. We have to handle the setbacks. People with disabilities have been doing it for hundreds and hundreds of years. And so this resolution is just, it's a call to arms for me. We can't let what's happening now stop us. We have to keep fighting, even when we fail now. It's a long game. You know, look 100 years back and we've done it. So I hope this board can join me in the next few months at the state level and hopefully at the federal level and just continuing to make our tiny voices heard. So that's the spirit in which I bring this to you and waste your time this evening and talk for too long. So if there's a motion,
I move to approve the Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month, the resolution and recognition of Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month of March 2025.
Second.
discussion.
I want to thank you for the changes you made. We've heard a lot of talk about I think targeting kids with disabilities, developmental and special education in the budget talks. That's very disturbing. That also seeks to disconnect us and pretend like that somehow we are not connected to our fellow humans who have disabilities. So I think that it's important to not acknowledge this. I think we should put the video of the crawl on Facebook. Some tidbits of history.
I want to put her little speech on Facebook.
That too, that's what I'm talking about. Let's share, let's lift this up. I think that the thing that speaks to me is that, like, I think we currently live in a world where people with disabilities have to adapt and transform to fit into our ableist spaces. And like, I want to live in a world where we transform to make our spaces safe and inclusive for everybody. And and that's what this work is also founded in. So I appreciate that. I had one possible tweak and it's fine. And maybe next year we'll change it, but you added the part about the funding, the special education cost funding. I know that it is a fact that special education costs are mandated. I would ask if we would seek to provide those services, even if they weren't mandated, and is there a piece of the language or the word mandated that also fuels some of the negative, the separation, like state mandates us to do this, mandates public schools to do this, and then like private schools, all these other people kind of like, we're not mandated. I don't know, it's just something to think about, like they underfund special education costs, that is just true. And yes, they mandate many of the services, but would we do them anyway? I would dare to say yes, and maybe we even go above and beyond what's mandated. So that would just be my one edit, and it doesn't have to even, I don't know, thoughts?
I would say that that's a really valid reflection. And also, a lot of people don't know that they're mandated. A lot of people don't understand that. So I think the answer to your question of would we do it anyway, the answer is yes, we already are. Like, that's what's happening.
We are doing it.
We are
without the
doing
state
it
funding.
without the state, without the funding available.
Mhm.
So I think, to say these are mandated services that they're not supported and they, and again, and I would say the conversation that really needs to pivot is making sure people understand we're talking about the problem is the funding.
Right.
The problem is never the student.
Or the mandate.
The problem is the funding, right? That's not the problem is the funding and the mandate. It's never the student.
I'm fine with keeping it in. I think that's more of just like a wondering aloud that happened for me, and I just think language is important again.
Chris?
I can't find that particular place, but I'm wondering, oh, here it is. How about if we were to add and necessary? Mandated and necessary.
Yeah. I like that. It's we're celebrating a brighter future. It's about 3 up from the page ending. It's Chris.
I do like that. The reason I'm asking is because if I can change it in real time, I can email it to Anna and we can get it printed and signed
And
tonight.
if you can't, then I would say I would reject the suggestion.
Would that work,
if you
Anna?
can't. If you can't change it.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise we can.
Okay,
Carla, if you email it to me, I'll print it when you guys are.
okay. Which whereas is it? See
So
if it was
later.
numbered instead of whereas, we would
Ritual. State mandated.
mandated and necessary. Okay, everyone comfortable with that?
Mhm.
All right,
Thank you.
beautiful. All right, any other comments or thoughts? All right,
Do we have to vote on that?
yes. So there's a motion pending to adopt the resolution in recognition of Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month 2025 as amended per Chris's suggestion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries, and I'm gonna share this with Kelly immediately, right? All right, and then we're on to our last remaining item, which is the staffing changes essential for tonight.
So moving into staffing changes, in reflection of school board policy 3140, approval of resignations, and 3120, approval of employment. And also, for 111, which requires board approval of new positions. So I am recommending that the board approve the resignation of Kevin Jonikin, special education teacher, and approve the creation of a limited term special education teacher position to fill that vacancy that the resignation creates. And then I further recommend that the board also approve the creation of a part-time limited term student services substitute teacher position to support an FMLA absence in the student services department at Glen Hills. And that they fill that position with the recommended candidate, Cooper Sheldrop.
And one motion is adequate for all of those?
I was
Or should
thinking
I
we
be
should,
separated?
I would separate them.
Yeah. you can separate.
So you're not going to try to fill the existing special education teacher position, right? Instead, you would be doing the limited term position for the remainder of this school year.
That's correct.
Okay,
So it would be a creation of a new position because the resignation would leave a space that we need to fill, but we would do it with a limited term substitute position versus or a limited term teacher position versus a contracted teacher position that's long term.
okay, shall we move one at a time?
So come to me last, please.
No,
Oh.
we're gonna
sorry,
move through the
motions.
motions
Yeah,
one
yeah,
at a time.
Yes.
And then we can discuss each one as needed. So the first one would be whether someone wants to move to approve the resignation of Kevin Jonikin as a sped teacher.
I move to approve the resignation of Kevin Jonikin as a special education teacher at Glen Hills.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, next is the addition of a limited term special education teacher position. If someone would like to make-
I move to have the addition of a limited term special education teacher position to make up the vacancy caused by the resignation of Kevin Jonikin.
Second.
Any discussion? I would just say that this is a very sensible approach, Anna, and I appreciate you coming up with this solution and approach. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, and then third is,
I move to approve the addition of a limited term part-time substitute student services teacher position.
is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I just wanted to clarify, and are these two separate positions that we're creating, or is this? So like,
Right, so this one is the first limited term was a special education. The
Correct.
second limited term is the
student services.
student service substitute.
So we still have a vacancy at this point that you would like
For the first
for
one.
the first one.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. We're working actively to fill and have.
Yep,
new
I just wanted to be clear.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do we need to say the individual's name in that motion? Or
No, that would be the
That's-
fourth
that's another
motion.
motion. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So currently is the addition of a limited term, part-time substitute student services teacher position. That's the pending motion. Further questions? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. And finally. Cooper
I
Shelter.
move to approve the hire of Cooper Sheldrick for the limited term, part-time substitute student services teacher.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I have one question. I noticed that there's some things they need to fulfill to make the offer. Sorry, my brain stopped working. I'm trying to go to actually be hired, right? Like, so the training, is there a reason, like, is there a time sensitive reason why you want us to approve this now prior to those things being completed? Like, one is a substitute training, 6 to 8 hours. One is maybe emergency licensure.
So that offer letter has not gone to the candidate yet until you make the approval, and then we issue it to the candidate, and then they have to do.
So
all
this
the-
has to, this is the necessity of the
Yeah.
order of things.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Yep, thanks.
Anyone else? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right.
To adjourn, I move to adjourn.
Second. Aye. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Thank you to our school people for staying an hour later. I know it's an ask, and I know you have to come back tomorrow. I appreciate you for sticking around. Thank you.